Hiraku Machio dies after living a miserable 39 years filled with betrayals and a terminal illness. He suddenly wakes up in a dark void where he meets a divine entity who introduces himself as the god of this world. God explains that Hiraku's harsh life was actually partly due to his own divine mistake and offers to make amends by reincarnating him into a new world with a perfectly healthy body. Hiraku accepts the apology and the offer, so God asks if he has any specific requests for his second life. Remembering a television show he used to watch in the hospital, Hiraku asks to live a peaceful life as a farmer far away from civilization. God mentions that agriculture falls under a different deity's jurisdiction, but he quickly secures permission and decides to grant Hiraku a special power called the omnipotent farming tool. With a flash of light, God sends Hiraku off to enjoy his second life to the fullest. Hiraku regains consciousness and slowly sits up on the rocky ground, taking in the sight of a dense, lush forest surrounding him. He raises his hands toward the sky, celebrating the fact that his body is completely healthy and free of pain for the first time in years. Ready to start his new farming life, he looks around and realizes that God really did send him to a place far from civilization, as he is completely surrounded by massive trees with no signs of human life anywhere. He notes that his clothes look just like a generic villager from a video game. Remembering the gift God gave him, Hiraku concentrates and summons the omnipotent farming tool. A glowing magic hoe materializes in his hand. He tests it out by striking the ground and is amazed to find that it effortlessly plows through the hard earth and thick tree roots without making him feel tired at all. The soil it leaves behind is perfectly fluffy and ready for planting. However, Hiraku quickly realizes that before he can start an actual farm, he needs to secure a reliable source of water and food. He wanders through the forest listening for a river, but all he hears is the rustling of leaves. Realizing the danger of wandering aimlessly in a forest that likely contains monsters, he decides to establish a base camp immediately. He spots a colossal ancient tree that towers over the rest of the canopy and decides it will serve as the perfect landmark for his new home. Since he cannot find a river or pond, Hiraku decides he needs to dig a well. He tries using the omnipotent farming tool as dowsing rods to find an underground water vein, but the method proves too complicated to figure out. He then transforms the tool into a shovel, marveling at how it can take the shape of any implement he imagines, though he notes he cannot create complex machinery like an excavator. Using the magical shovel, he starts digging near the base of the massive tree. The tool allows him to dig continuously without any physical fatigue, but he soon realizes he has dug a vertical hole so deep that he cannot climb out. Realizing his mistake, he quickly digs a diagonal tunnel to escape and serendipitously strikes a subterranean water source on his first try. Relieved to have secured fresh water, he attributes his good luck to God's blessing. With water taken care of, his next priority is securing food and a safe shelter, though he notes that he surprisingly does not feel hungry yet. He figures this is another perk of his new body or the tool. To build a temporary shelter, he decides to hollow out the base of the massive tree. He transforms his tool into an axe to chop down some nearby trees for materials. He makes a strategic cut on a large tree trunk, expecting a difficult process, but the magical axe completely severs the massive tree in a single swing. Stunned by the tool's overwhelming power, he laughs in relief and quickly gets to work processing the timber. He turns the tool into a hatchet to strip the branches and peel the bark, finding that it cuts through the hard wood as easily as cheese. He then uses a hook tool to drag the heavy logs into a neat pile. While experimenting with building techniques, he completely loses track of time and suddenly realizes the sun is setting. Panicking at the thought of being in a dark, monster-filled forest without a light source, he desperately tries to use the tool to create a flashlight, a lamp, or a lighter, but none of these modern devices materialize. He assumes this limitation is related to God's jurisdiction rules regarding complex technology. Realizing he just needs something to create heat, he imagines a magnifying glass, and the tool successfully transforms into one. Using the last rays of the setting sun, he focuses the light onto some wood shavings and manages to start a small campfire just in time. Hiraku spends his first night sitting inside the small hollow he carved into the massive tree trunk, using wooden cups and plates he fashioned from the timber. He notices that his vision is incredibly sharp even in the dark, wondering if it is due to his newly healthy body or the illumination from the 2 moons hanging in the night sky. The sight of the 2 moons fully sinks in, confirming that he really is in another world. When morning arrives, he boils some water from his well and drinks it, feeling refreshed and ready to work. He uses the magnifying glass to start another fire, and then gets back to clearing the surrounding land with a scythe, transforming the tool into a pickaxe to remove stumps. Since the tool only prevents physical fatigue but still consumes his energy, his hunger finally catches up with him. He considers traveling further to forage for food, but his problem is abruptly solved when a massive gray rabbit monster with glowing red eyes and huge fangs aggressively charges at him from the bushes. Acting on pure instinct, Hiraku swings his tool and accidentally unleashes a massive shockwave that effortlessly kills the beast. After the adrenaline fades, he uses a knife form of his tool to butcher the giant rabbit. He roasts the meat over his campfire, and while it has a gamey, bloody taste, he is incredibly grateful to have a solid meal to keep his energy up. With food and water secured, Hiraku decides to address his sanitation need. He constructs a fully functional outhouse with a wooden seat, an underground waste tank, and drainage pipes, ensuring he can do his business in peace. Having satisfied his basic survival needs, Hiraku finally begins his true goal of farming. He uses a silver-headed hoe to quickly till several neat rows of soil in a large clearing. However, as he stands back to admire his work, a major flaw in his plan dawns on him. He realizes he does not have any seeds or seedlings to plant. He lists all the crops he wishes he could grow, like potatoes, tomatoes, cucumbers, and corn, but resigns himself to the fact that he might have to forage the dangerous forest for wild plants. To his absolute shock, he wakes up the very next morning to find vibrant green sprouts growing perfectly in every single row of the tilled soil. He questions if plants in this world grow without seeds, or if the omnipotent farming tool magically planted what he desired. Seeing the different types of sprouts, he resolves to protect his new farm from the giant rabbits and any other monsters lurking nearby. He immediately grabs a pickaxe and a shovel, working tirelessly to build a sturdy log fence entirely around the garden area. To add an extra layer of defense, he digs a deep trench along the outside of the fence. Over the next few days, his defensive perimeter proves successful, though he still has to occasionally strike down giant rabbits that try to bypass the barriers, giving him a steady supply of meat. He also discovers that using a watering can formed from his magical tool drastically accelerates the growth of his crops, making the sprouts larger by the day. Tired of living inside the cramped tree trunk, Hiraku decides to upgrade his living situation. Using the timber he previously harvested, he constructs a proper log cabin by interlocking notched wooden beams and digging the floor down to create more vertical space. He roofs it with tree bark held in place by wooden pegs. When he finally sits on a bench inside his new home, he feels a deep sense of accomplishment and notes that this civilized lifestyle makes him incredibly happy. He enjoys watching his mystery crops grow and feels motivated to work hard every single day. Just as his life starts to stabilize, Hiraku spots two massive, heavily scarred black wolves with piercing red eyes standing outside his fence. At first, he is alarmed, but he quickly notices that they are not acting aggressively and are covered in wounds. Remembering his childhood dream of owning a dog and knowing that dogs are great allies for farmers, he decides to help them. He places a long wooden plank over his defensive trench and invites the wolves inside. He feeds them a large platter of fresh boar meat, explaining that he recently had to kill a giant boar that tried to climb his fence. As the wolves eat, Hiraku notices that the female wolf has a bulging stomach and realizes she is heavily pregnant. He guesses they were likely attacked by the boar or another monster while traveling. Suddenly, the female wolf named Yuki collapses in the dirt and begins experiencing intense labor pains right there in the yard. Panicking about what to do, Hiraku quickly decides that the yard is too exposed and unsafe for a delivery. He ushers Yuki and the male wolf named Kuro into his newly constructed log cabin to give them a secure, warm place to rest. Not wanting to intrude or cause them any stress, he sets up a campfire outside and decides to sleep in his old tree trunk shelter for the night. He spends the night worrying if he interfered too much, or if the giant boar's mates might attack while the wolves are vulnerable. Eventually, he falls asleep against the rocky wall of the trunk. The next morning, Hiraku wakes up and heads over to the cabin to check on the wolves. He knocks on the doorframe and peers inside, his eyes widening in surprise and joy when he sees 4 small, healthy black wolf pups nursing beside their exhausted but safe mother. Kuro sits proudly nearby, playfully sticking its tongue out. Hiraku feels a wave of relief and cuts up the best parts of his leftover boar meat to serve them a celebratory feast. He originally assumes the wolves will leave once they recover, but he soon realizes they are completely comfortable and have no intention of moving on. He decides to name the adult male Kuro and the female Yuki, while naming the 4 little pups Kuroichi, Kuroni, Kurosan, and Kuroyon. Not wanting to kick a nursing mother and her pups out of a warm home, Hiraku gets back to work and builds a second, even better log cabin with a chimney for himself, leaving the first one entirely to his new canine family. As the days pass, the wolf pups start running around and playing in the yard, and Hiraku's crops finally become ready for harvest. He is thrilled to discover that his first successful harvest yields a massive batch of vibrant red tomatoes. Although the vines are unruly and the fruit is somewhat small, they are delicious and perfectly ripe. He brings a batch of the fresh tomatoes to the wolves, surprised to find that the carnivorous beasts absolutely love eating vegetables. Seeing them devour the tomatoes makes him even more determined to grow delicious crops. Kuro and Yuki quickly integrate into the farm's routine, hunting for game and patrolling the perimeter to keep monsters at bay. With his farm expanding, his crops flourishing, and a loyal pack of wolves by his side, Hiraku decides he needs to build a storage hut, make new furniture, and craft better tools. He looks out over his thriving settlement, feeling deeply fulfilled, and vows to continue working hard to build his peaceful, dreamlike life in this new world. Meanwhile, high up in a dark cosmic void, God decides to check in on Hiraku to see how he is handling his new life. God quickly realizes he made a massive mistake. He accidentally dropped Hiraku right into the middle of the Forest of Death. This forest is notoriously dangerous and packed with terrifying monsters. God watches Hiraku farming all alone and panics about the twisted situation. He immediately wants to pull Hiraku out of there and bring him back. However, God remembers his own strict rules and realizes he cannot interfere with a mortal's life once it has started. Frustrated, God simply hopes that Hiraku survives. He hopes Hiraku will accept his apologies if his soul ends up returning to the cosmic void too soon. Down in the forest, Hiraku is completely unaware of the danger surrounding him. He stands in his garden and looks at the results of using his magical farming tool. He realizes he has successfully grown potatoes, onions, tomatoes, and cabbage without ever planting a single seed. He figures out the mechanics of the tool. Whenever he tills the soil, he just has to imagine the specific crop he wants, and the tool magically sows those exact seeds into the ground. He decided to test this theory earlier by thinking about bean sprouts while hoeing the dirt. Soon enough, actual bean sprouts popped up, proving his theory. He knows they will eventually grow into full soybeans, so he plans to just sit back and watch them develop. He notes that the crops planted with his magical tool grow incredibly fast. Sometimes they grow so quickly that it actually startles him. He checks his potatoes and notices that some of them have turned green from being exposed to the sun. He remembers that green potato sprouts are poisonous, so he decides to avoid eating those entirely. To prevent this from happening again, he starts mounding extra dirt around the base of the plants to keep the growing potatoes buried in the dark. He admits he knows nothing about farming from his past life. He just has to learn from his mistakes and keep pushing forward. He feels incredibly grateful to the gods for giving him this peaceful farming life. To show his appreciation, he carves 2 wooden statues representing the deities and places them in a small shrine. He feels like his little camp is finally becoming more civilized. Later, he cooks up a hearty stew over a campfire using rabbit meat and his fresh pesticide-free vegetables. He just boils everything together since he does not have any salt or spices to season the broth. He realizes the meat tastes much better because he drains the blood from the animals immediately after killing them. The 2 black wolves, Kuro and Yuki, absolutely love the fresh meat. Hiraku worries he might be spoiling them with such good food, but he is happy as long as they enjoy it. He still really wishes he had some salt to make the meals better. Wanting to improve his diet even more, he plants an orchard of fruit trees, including apples, pears, and persimmons. He knows fruit trees take years to mature and bear fruit. He is perfectly fine with waiting as long as it takes. He spends time in his cave-like home petting Kuro and playing with the wolves. He feels deeply thankful for their company, knowing the isolation would drive him crazy without them. He notices Kuro has a small horn on his head, but he just brushes it off since this is a fantasy world where dogs probably just have horns. The wolves prove to be incredibly helpful beyond just keeping him company. They know the forest perfectly and prevent him from getting lost while exploring. Thanks to their guidance, Hiraku ventures deeper into the woods and discovers a fresh river with a small waterfall. This river is about a 30-minute walk from his camp. He decides to dig a long canal to bring the fresh water directly to his farm. Knowing he will spend a lot of time working at the river, he builds a functional wooden toilet right at the construction site to keep things civilized. He also transforms his magical farming tool into a wheelbarrow so he can transport materials without getting tired. He puts Kuro in the wheelbarrow and pushes him at top speed through the forest. They end up crashing and tumbling down a steep hill. After hitting the ground, Hiraku realizes he desperately needs to pave proper roads before using the wheelbarrow again. Back at his main camp, he clears more trees and expands his crop field. He plants rapeseed so he can harvest it for cooking oil. He plants wheat because flour is easy to store and versatile for baking. He also plants sugarcane because he really wants to make some sweets. He checks on his bean sprouts and sees they have fully grown into mature soybeans. He desperately wants to boil them to make edamame, but the lack of salt stops him. He wonders if he can find any rock salt deposits nearby. As time passes, the weather starts getting colder. Hiraku sees snow forming on the distant mountain peaks and realizes winter is coming. He knows his thin clothes will not keep him warm. He tries to make a winter coat out of the giant rabbit pelts, but the raw skins smell terrible and he fears they will rot, so he scraps the idea. He figures his only option is to chop a massive amount of firewood and spend the entire winter huddled by the fireplace inside his cabin. While sorting his harvest, Kuro suddenly starts barking aggressively. Hiraku turns around and sees a terrifying massive black spider with white stripes and glowing red eyes standing right in his camp. He panics and assumes it is a dangerous monster. Before he can attack, the giant spider magically spins a glowing white thread and creates a beautiful high-quality handkerchief with red embroidery. The spider presents it to Hiraku. He realizes the spider is friendly and thanks her for the amazing gift. He decides to let the giant spider live in the massive tree above his cabin. He names her Zabaton based on her cushion-like appearance. Zabaton loves eating potatoes and turns out to be an incredible tailor. She takes the smelly rabbit pelts Hiraku abandoned and somehow crafts them into a warm, stylish green winter coat with fur trimming. She also makes him comfortable bed sheets stuffed with leaves and thick curtains to block the cold wind. Hiraku puts on his new coat and feels thrilled about how much Zabaton has upgraded his standard of living. Eventually, heavy snow falls and covers the forest. Winter forces Hiraku to stay inside his cozy cabin while the dogs rest by the fire. Zabaton stays up in her tree, likely hibernating through the freezing weather. Hiraku eats hot-baked potatoes by the fire but feels a creeping sense of dread. The heavy snow actually causes his cabin's roof to buckle and collapse, creating a huge mess. He manages to fix it, but the incident leaves him worried about surviving extreme weather. While he has plenty of stored food, the sheer isolation of winter takes a heavy toll on his mind. He feels incredibly lonely and worries that he might completely forget how to speak since he has not talked to another person in months. Thankfully, the cold eventually breaks, the snow melts, and spring arrived. Hiraku goes outside to cook vegetable stew. He watches the 4 young wolf pups, who are now fully grown, head out into the forest. He feels a mix of pride and sadness as they leave to find mates. A few days later, they all return to the camp with new wolf partners. Around the same time, Zabaton climbs down from her tree accompanied by a swarm of tiny baby spiders. Hiraku realizes Zabaton was female all along and just had a massive litter. He is happy for his animal companions, but admits he is quite jealous of their growing families. With so many new mouths to feed, he grabs his magical hoe and works tirelessly to expand his fields even further. One day, while working in the dirt, Zabaton starts frantically hitting a wooden alarm board. Kuro rushes over and leads Hiraku deep into the woods to investigate. They arrive at a large tree and find a young white-haired girl tied up tightly in Zabaton's spiderweb. The wolves surround her and growl menacingly. Hiraku is completely shocked to finally see another humanoid person. The girl cries and begs for help. Hiraku unties her from the webs, noting how nice it is to hear a human voice again. The moment she is free, the girl suddenly lunges forward and embraces him. Her eyes glow bright blue as she bites hard into his neck, drinking his blood. A massive surge of pink magical energy swirls around her. As she feeds, her small, childlike body magically grows and transforms into a mature, beautiful woman wearing a black dress. She pulls away, wiping blood from her face, and cheerfully thanks him for saving her. Hiraku stands there completely confused, wondering who she is and if she is actually a monster planning to kill him. Kuro suddenly snarls at the woman. Terrified by the giant wolf, the woman loses her magical concentration and instantly shrinks back into her small, childlike form. She cowers against the tree in fear. Hiraku asks her if she is an enemy. The girl aggressively denies it, blaming the wolves for attacking her first. She explains she only sucked his blood because she desperately needed to recover her strength after the fight. She complains that she lost her adult form and her clothes because she ran out of energy. Hiraku feels guilty that his dogs beat her up so badly. He offers his neck and tells her to drink more of his blood to heal herself. The girl is shocked by his offer but happily accepts. She drinks deeply and praises his blood for being incredibly full of vitality. She quickly regains her adult form and her magical dress. She warns Hiraku that sucking any more blood might kill him, but he brushes it off, claiming he feels absolutely fine thanks to his perfectly healthy body. He then takes her on a tour of his farm. The girl is absolutely amazed to find a thriving agricultural settlement hidden deep in the dangerous forest. She looks at the tomato plants and admits she has never seen them before. Hiraku magically summons scissors and harvests a ripe tomato for her. She takes a bite and is blown away by the juicy, delicious flavor. She eagerly asks to see the rest of his crops. They walk through the cornfields and harvest giant radishes together, having a great time pulling vegetables from the dirt. By sunset, they gather a huge basket of food and head into Hiraku's cabin. The girl uses a magical blue holographic display to analyze all the different vegetables. Hiraku realizes she is using real magic, which makes sense for this fantasy world. The girl introduces herself as Lululusi, a vampire who specializes in researching medicinal plants. She explains that she got into a nasty conflict with some corrupt nobles who wanted to steal her research. She fled from them and decided to hide out in the Forest of Death to lay low and study the local flora. She complains that the forest completely lives up to its savage, deadly reputation, noting she almost died to his pets. Hiraku is completely confused by this statement. Lu is shocked that he does not know about the forest's terrifying reputation, especially since he managed to tame such ferocious monster wolves. Hiraku plays dumb, acting like he has no idea what she is talking about. Lu then asks about his farming tool, assuming it is a powerful magical artifact since it creates perfect items out of thin air. Hiraku agrees it might be a magic tool but keeps the details vague. Lu admits she has lived a very long time but still has much to learn. She asks Hiraku if she can stay at his camp for a while to continue her research. Hearing this, Hiraku immediately slams his cup on the table. He loudly declares that he wants her to stay with him forever. Lu is extremely flustered by the sudden outburst. She tries to remind him about the dangerous nobles hunting her, but Hiraku yells that he does not care. She reminds him she is a vampire, but he shouts that it is not a problem at all. He confesses that he originally came to the forest to live alone because he is bad with people. However, the extreme isolation broke him, and he cannot handle living in total solitude anymore. He begs her to stay. Lu blushes heavily and agrees to live with him, noting she has nowhere else to go anyway. She suggests they take their time getting to know each other. She then mentions that his wording sounded exactly like a sudden marriage proposal. Hiraku freezes in embarrassment, realizing she is right. Lu asks if he actually meant it that way. Hiraku pushes past his shame and boldly confirms that a proposal is exactly what he intended. He immediately drops to the floor in a dramatic, begging bow, pleading with her to accept. Lu blushes deeply, smiles warmly, and tells him she already said yes. Hiraku jumps into the air with joy, grabs Lu, and flies around the room celebrating his new companion. The next morning, Hiraku heads out to the fields. Lu approaches him to say good morning, but she has returned to her childlike form. Hiraku asks why she shrank again. Lu explains it is a defense mechanism to keep him from making any inappropriate advances toward her. Hiraku awkwardly agrees to restrain himself. He is just incredibly happy to have someone to exchange morning greetings with. He tells Lu he plans to grow sweet potatoes next because they store well and are easy to cook, which is important now that the population is growing. He notes that Lu is technically the first human villager to move in. He quickly corrects himself, counting the wolves and spiders, and concludes Lu is actually the 30th villager. Lu laughs at the ridiculous title, wondering if it even matters. She asks if they can try growing her medicinal herbs in his fields. Hiraku confidently agrees. Lu says they need to find seeds first, but Hiraku smiles and tells her they do not need seeds to grow things here. Lu is left completely confused by his statement as they prepare to work on the farm. Life on the farm continues to improve as Lu settles into her new routine alongside Hiraku. She proves to be incredibly useful, using her magical abilities to create glowing golden circles that provide bright light for the inside of the wooden sheds. Hiraku is amazed by the display, though Lu casually dismisses it as basic magic. Later, while they sit by the massive tree eating a hearty meal of meat and asparagus, Hiraku mentions that the food has a very mild flavor. He explains that he prefers not to cook without salt, but he has been completely unable to find any in the forest and is on the verge of giving up. Lu gives him a very intense look of disbelief. She points to the dark stone walls of a nearby tunnel and explains that the rocks are actually full of salt. She tells him that they simply need to dissolve the rocks in water and then boil the water away to leave the salt behind. Hiraku feels slightly foolish for not noticing the salt deposits while he was busy digging out his cave storage. The next morning, Hiraku and Lu head out to check on the progress of the fruit trees. Hiraku proudly shows her the young saplings he recently transplanted into the rich soil. He explains that he planted oranges and peaches this time, but he is already planning to plant chestnuts in the future. Lu is excited to see how the fruit will turn out. While they sit on a log drinking herbal tea, Hiraku mentions that while Lu's tea is good, he really wants to drink green tea. He recalls that green tea, oolong tea, and black tea are all made from the exact same leaves, just processed differently, and he wonders if he can replicate the process. Their peaceful morning is suddenly interrupted when a blonde girl with large white feathered wings crashes into the forest clearing. She is completely surrounded by the horned wolves and begs for forgiveness, admitting she was wrong to attack them first. Hiraku recognizes the situation and immediately steps in to rescue her. Once the wolves back off, the girl uses her magic to cast a healing spell on herself, emitting bright glowing energy from her fingertips. Hiraku is thrilled to see another person using real magic, but his excitement fades when Lu arrives and immediately starts yelling at the newcomer. The blonde girl named Tia recognizes Lu and demands that she surrender quietly. Hiraku is totally confused by the hostility. Tia explains that she is an angel and she has been tracking Lu down to collect a massive bounty. She reveals that Lu went on a rampage and destroyed a town. Lu gets defensive and explains that a local noble kept forcing her to make medicine and drugs for them endlessly, so she decided to blow up their estate to teach them a lesson. Tia argues that blowing up a noble's home is a serious crime, but Lu points out that Tia is not exactly in a position of power right now. Lu and Tia quickly realize that they both suffered the exact same humiliating defeat at the hands of the horned wolves, and they bond over how impossible it is to fight the agile, magic-resistant beasts. Hiraku decides to formally introduce himself, but Lu suddenly interjects and introduces Hiraku as her husband. Tia is absolutely shocked by the revelation that Lu is married to a human. Hiraku asks Tia about her angelic nature, assuming she serves God. Tia gets flustered and admits that angels are simply a warrior race, known for having more muscles than brains, though they used to be worshipped in the past. Realizing that Tia has nowhere else to go, Lu casually invites her to live on the farm with them. Tia is hesitant, so Lu decides to give her a grand tour of the settlement. She shows Tia the massive vegetable fields and the growing orchard, leaving the angel completely amazed. However, the tour takes a dark turn when Lu proudly introduces Tia to Zabaton, the giant demon spider. The sheer terror of seeing the mythical beast causes Tia to completely faint and collapse onto the barren ground. After Tia recovers, Lu and Hiraku put her straight to work harvesting the crops. Tia initially complains about an angel having to do dirty farm work, but Hiraku teaches her how to properly pick the massive green cabbages. To reward her efforts, Hiraku prepares a simple snack by washing the fresh cabbage leaves and sprinkling them with their newly acquired rock salt. Tia takes a bite and is absolutely blown away by how delicious the fresh vegetables taste. By the time the sun sets, they have harvested massive baskets full of cabbages, celery, and strawberries. Tia eats a strawberry and praises its sweet and tart flavor, admitting that the farming work is actually incredibly fulfilling. With Tia thoroughly enjoying her time, Lu insists that she stay and live with them permanently, arguing that there is way too much farm work for just 2 people to handle. Tia agrees to stay, and the 3 of them spend the next few weeks working together, harvesting crops and moving heavy logs with the help of Tia's magic. Despite their hard work, Tia points out that they are operating at maximum capacity and desperately need even more help to keep up with the massive harvest. Hiraku jokes that Tia just needs to work harder, but he agrees that they cannot expand the fields without more hands. The population of the farm continues to grow in other ways as well. The original wolf pups have fully matured, sprouting their own horns, and have now given birth to a massive new generation of puppies. Hiraku tries to name them all, coming up with names like Kuruni, Kuro 2, Kuro 3, and Kuro 4, but he eventually gives up because there are simply too many dogs to keep track of. Realizing their small wooden hut is no longer sufficient, Hiraku builds a massive, stable-like structure next to the orchard to serve as a dedicated dog area. Meanwhile, Zabaton's eggs finally hatch. Hundreds of tiny blue spiderlings emerge and use their white silk to create small parachutes, riding the wind to start new journeys far away from the farm. Hiraku watches them leave with a bit of sadness, having planned to let them live in the orchard. But he is relieved to see that a good number of the spiderlings decide to stay behind and live in the cave with Zabaton. A few days later, Tia announces that she needs to leave the forest for a short trip. Hiraku is worried she might not come back, but Lu assures him she will return. Just as Lu predicted, Tia returns a few days later, but she does not come alone. She brings a group of 7 female high elves with her. The elves all wear matching green and white uniforms and introduce themselves as Leia, Leaf, Lakat, Lise, Lili, Lita, and Lise. Hiraku is confused by their extremely similar names, but Leia explains that they are all closely related. The elves explain their tragic past to Hiraku. 200 years ago, their village in the north was completely destroyed after they were dragged into a human war. Their race was scattered, and this specific group has been wandering through the dangerous woods ever since, desperately looking for a safe place to settle down. Without a permanent home, they have been completely unable to repopulate and save their race from extinction. They beg Hiraku to let them live on the farm. Lu and Tia both strongly vouch for the elves, assuring Hiraku that high elves are incredibly talented and hardworking. Hiraku agrees to take them in, as long as everyone promises to get along. However, he quickly realizes he needs to introduce them to the rest of the residents. He takes the elves to the cave to meet Zabaton, and all 7 elves instantly faint from pure terror. Once they wake up, he introduces them to the massive wolf pack, and the elves immediately faint a second time. Hiraku finds their dramatic reactions entirely expected at this point. With 7 new residents, the farm desperately needs more housing. Leia mentions that the elves all want to live together in one large house. Hiraku discovers that the elves are absolute masters of construction and lumber processing. They take charge of the project, giving Hiraku specific orders. Hiraku focuses on the heavy labor, digging the foundation ditches, leveling the ground, and using his magical tool to effortlessly slice down massive, unbreakable ironwood trees in a single swing. The elves handle the intricate work of cutting the logs and fitting them perfectly together. In just 10 days, they managed to build a massive 2-story wooden log cabin. The new house is shaped like a long rectangle stretching from east to west. The entrance opens into a massive communal living room that doubles as a dining hall, featuring an open ceiling that reaches the 2nd floor. The 1st floor also features large storage rooms on both sides, while the 2nd floor is lined with individual bedrooms for each of the elves. The elves even set up magical lighting to illuminate the interior. Hiraku is slightly jealous of their incredible building techniques, but is very happy to see them finally safe and settled. As the elves adjust to their new life, Hiraku watches them eagerly eat raw garlic and green onions straight from the garden. He mentions that he always believed elves were peaceful creatures who lived in harmony with nature, only ate fruit, hated fire, and refused to use metal. The elves burst out laughing at his ridiculous assumption. They explain that the forest is a brutal, deadly place, and anyone who tries to live like that would die instantly. They assure him they are hardcore survivalists who regularly use fire and eat meat. To prove their diverse skills, the elves offer to handle all the blacksmithing for the farm. Hiraku always assumed dwarves handled metalwork, but the elves quickly build an earthen stone furnace. They gather iron sand from the nearby river and use charcoal to melt it down. They hammer the molten iron and successfully forge a high-quality metal cooking pan. Hiraku is overjoyed to see their civilization advancing so quickly and praises the elves for their incredible talents. The elves joke that after wandering for 200 years, they learned how to do absolutely everything except settle down and reproduce. Hiraku notes to himself that they have finally settled down, but he purposely chooses to ignore the comment about reproduction. While foraging for medicinal herbs, the elves discover the farm's wheat fields. Hiraku explains that they already harvested the wheat and ground it into flour for storage. The elves reveal they found a ceramic jar containing natural wild yeast and ask if they can try baking bread. Soon the elves are rolling the dough into long strips, wrapping them around wooden sticks, and roasting them over an open stone fire pit. The resulting spiral bread is absolutely delicious, and Hiraku, Lu, and Tia happily devour the fresh snacks. Realizing the massive potential of having fresh bread, Hiraku immediately decides he needs to expand the wheat fields to increase their flour supply. However, the rapid expansion of the farm makes Hiraku slightly paranoid. He asks Lu if the Demon Lord, who technically rules the world, will be angry that they are building a massive settlement on his land. Lu casually explains that while the region falls under the Demon Lord's control, this specific area is universally known as the Forest of No Return. It is considered so incredibly dangerous that absolutely no one claims ownership of it. She assures Hiraku that since he cleared the land and built the entire farm with his own 2 hands without any outside support, the land legally belongs entirely to him. Hiraku is greatly relieved to hear this and stops worrying about eviction. Later that night, Lu and Tia sit together in their cabin, eating fresh tomatoes and cucumbers. They gossip about how incredibly strange Hiraku is. They find it absolutely baffling that a human managed to tame legendary monsters like the Inferno Wolves and the Demon Spider, and that his magical farming skills produce crops that defy logic. Yet, despite his overwhelming power, he lacks even the most basic knowledge about the world, completely misunderstanding the nature of angels and elves. They find his ignorance amusing but are deeply thankful for the paradise he has created. Meanwhile, Hiraku sits alone at his table under the warm glow of a lamp. He thinks about all the progress they have made and realizes he has not worked on his planned waterway in a long time. Knowing that the elves possess incredible engineering skills, he decides to ask them for help with the canal project the very next day. The next day, Hiraku starts his morning routine and goes to check on Zabaton. He is surprised to find that the giant spider has captured a massive queen bee wearing a tiny crown. The bee is completely wrapped in webbing and terrified. Hiraku decides that instead of killing it, he wants to keep it as a pet so he can harvest honey. He builds a small wooden bee house near his orchard and moves the queen inside. In just a few days, the worker bees build a huge nest and start producing honey. Lu and Tia suggest that he should plant a flower garden nearby so the bees have plenty of nectar. Later, Hiraku meets up with Leah to inspect the giant reservoir they dug out. He explains his plan to build a long waterway to bring water from the river all the way to the farm. He admits he is not sure what materials to use, because stone is incredibly rare in the forest and wooden planks will leak too much water over that distance. He suddenly gets an idea and transforms his almighty farming tool into a massive mallet. He takes the leftover dirt from digging the reservoir and strikes it with the glowing hammer. The magic instantly compacts the loose dirt into solid blocks that are as hard as concrete. The elves are amazed and quickly join in to help him mass-produce the blocks. The girls carry the heavy pieces through the forest, and together they assemble a massive aqueduct leading from a nearby waterfall straight into their village. The water flows perfectly into the reservoir, solving their irrigation problem. While they are admiring their work, a large silver fish with razor-sharp teeth suddenly leaps out of the incoming water and flops onto the ground. Hiraku recognizes it as one of the vicious river monsters of the forest, but he is just happy to finally have fresh seafood. He quickly kills the fish, guts it, and skewers it over a campfire. Lu and Tia are terrified of eating a monster fish, but Hiraku takes a bite and realizes it tastes exactly like normal salmon. He convinces the girls to try it, and they are completely blown away by the delicious flavor. The elves also love the meal, so Hiraku catches a bunch more fish and salts them, so they can store them for the winter. Following this success, Hiraku decides he wants to try growing rice. He uses his hoe to till a small patch of dirt while thinking about rice plants, and golden stalks instantly sprout from the dry soil. He realizes he can grow rice normally, but he wants to do it the traditional way by building a flooded rice paddy. He furiously swings his hoe to dig a massive shallow pit near the reservoir. The elves watch in awe as he completely reshapes the landscape through sheer physical power. Once the pit is dug, he fills it with water from his new canal, creating a muddy pond. He gathers the elf girls and hands them bundles of green rice seedlings. The girls hesitate at first because the mud is slimy, but they quickly get the hang of it and help him plant neat rows of seedlings across the entire flooded field. To keep pests away, Zabaton sends a bunch of her tiny spiderlings to patrol the area. Thanks to the magic water and Hiraku's farming tool, the rice grows incredibly fast and is ready to harvest in no time. Hiraku and the elves use sickles to slice through the golden stalks, clearing the field in a matter of minutes. They hang the bundles of rice on wooden racks to dry in the sun. Once the moisture is gone, Hiraku builds a spiked wooden threshing machine to separate the grains from the stalks. He then sifts the grains through a wooden sieve to remove the leaves and uses a large stone mortar and pestle to polish the rice and remove the husks. The extensive manual labor completely exhausts the elf girls, and Tia questions if the food is really worth all this effort. Hiraku promises them it is, and he moves the polished white rice to a traditional stone stove to cook. He asks Lu to light the fire using her magic. Lu gets overly excited and summons a massive, explosive dark flame, completely missing the point of cooking. Hiraku scolds her and explains he needs a low, steady flame to cook the rice properly. After adjusting the fire, the rice cooks to perfection, releasing a thick cloud of steam when he lifts the lid. Hiraku forms the sticky white rice into fluffy onigiri balls and stuffs them with chunks of the salted salmon from earlier. He hands the large rice balls to the girls, who are slightly skeptical of the plain-looking food. However, the moment Lu takes a bite, she is overwhelmed by how perfectly the salty fish pairs with the soft rice. All the girls devour their food, their faces lighting up with pure joy. Hiraku feels incredibly proud and considers this his happiest moment as a farmer yet. After finishing their meal, Hiraku realizes he is completely covered in dried mud from working in the paddy. He tries to wipe it off, but the elf girls simply cast a cleaning spell that instantly removes all the dirt from their bodies and clothes. Hiraku is amazed by the convenient magic, but he admits he really misses the feeling of soaking in a hot bath. He decides his next major project will be building a proper bathhouse. He sketches out a floor plan in the dirt, detailing a furnace to heat the water, a large wooden tub, a washing area, and a changing room. The girls are confused about what a bath is, assuming they can just wash in the cold river, but Hiraku insists that hot baths are essential for health and relaxation. He builds the furnace using his compacted dirt blocks and sets up a system of wooden pipes to feed water from the canal directly into the large wooden tub inside the cabin. However, as the project nears completion, Hiraku realizes a major sanitation issue. He does not want their dirty bathwater and toilet waste draining straight back into the clean river. Tia immediately offers a solution and flies off into the forest. She returns a few minutes later carrying several bouncy blue slime monsters. She explains that slimes are nature's garbage disposals and will eat any organic waste and purify the water. Hiraku builds a dedicated purification pool for the slimes at the end of the drainage pipes, and even drops a few slimes into the outhouses to keep the toilets completely cleaned. With the plumbing sorted out, Hiraku heads to the woods to gather firewood to heat the bath. While stacking logs, he notices a bunch of wild mushrooms growing on the wood. He admits he has been too terrified to forage for mushrooms because he cannot tell the poisonous ones apart from the safe ones. Lu confirms that mushroom identification is incredibly difficult, but the elves confidently state that any mushroom is edible if you cook it long enough. Hiraku refuses to take that risk, so he uses his farming tool to magically cultivate safe varieties like shiitake and shimeji directly on the log. Once the bathwater is finally heated, Hiraku gathers all the girls in the changing room to explain the bathing process. He tells them they must take off their clothes and wash themselves in the outer area before getting into the hot tub. The girls are still confused and ask him to demonstrate. Hiraku nervously strips down to a towel, washes up, and sinks into the steaming hot water. He closes his eyes and lets out a deep sigh of relief, remembering how much he hated being stuck in a hospital bed without being able to bathe. His peaceful moment is suddenly ruined when the elf girls excitedly strip off their clothes and jump into the tub with him. They splash around and enjoy the warm water, completely unfazed by being naked together. Hiraku, however, gets incredibly embarrassed and awkwardly climbs out of the tub early, leaving the girls to enjoy the water. He realizes he should have built separate baths for men and women, though the girls complain that keeping the bath to himself would be totally unfair. Later that afternoon, Hiraku decides to make a massive mushroom hot pot for dinner using his newly grown shiitake. While he is preparing the ingredients, the wolf pack suddenly escorts 5 brand new elf girls out of the forest and into the clearing. The new arrivals introduce themselves as Lafa, Lasa, Lalasha, Lalu, and Lami. Hiraku immediately notices their names all start with the same sound, and Leah explains that these girls are actually from her original village. The two groups of elves are overjoyed to be reunited after spending 200 years wandering separately through the dangerous forest. Hiraku formally invites the newcomers to stay and live on the farm with everyone else. The new elves gratefully accept his offer and immediately volunteer to start working. Leah suggests they use this opportunity to completely remodel and expand the living quarters since the population is growing so fast. The elves cheer enthusiastically and declare they need to build more houses and start making babies as soon as possible to ensure the survival of their race. Hiraku feels overwhelmed by their aggressive enthusiasm, but is happy to see the village thriving. Watching the noisy, growing settlement from the edge of the forest, Kuro reflects on his own journey. He remembers his early life being born alone in the dark woods. He was a massive, undefeated wolf who planned to spend his entire life hunting and doing whatever he pleased. That all changed the day he met his mate. He challenged her to a fight and was completely destroyed. Accepting his defeat, they became partners and traveled the forest together. Eventually, she got pregnant, and Kuro looked forward to raising a family. However, their luck ran out when they crossed paths with the grappler bear, the undisputed king of the forest. The bear viciously attacked them, leaving them gravely injured and unable to hunt. Desperate and starving, they fled deeper into the heart of the forest, a place so dangerous even the bear refused to enter. There they stumbled upon Hiraku. Kuro was initially baffled that a weak-looking human could survive in the deadliest part of the woods, but he quickly sensed an infinite, terrifying power radiating from Hiraku's farming tool. Instead of killing them, Hiraku healed their wounds and fed them fresh great boar meat. Realizing this human was a being of immense power and kindness, Kuro and his mate swore absolute loyalty to him. Kuro proudly watches his fully grown pups running around the farm and thinks about how massive their master's pack has become, especially with all the females he keeps gathering. Kuro is fully convinced that Hiraku is an unstoppable force of nature, but he still finds it highly amusing that his master remains completely oblivious to the fact that his pet dogs are actually legendary, terrifying monsters known as the Inferno Wolves. Their massive new 2-story log mansion is finally completely finished, and everyone is amazed by its sheer size as they stand outside and admire the wooden exterior. Hiraku and the elf girls take a comprehensive tour of the interior, noting how the design successfully incorporates all the specific requests from the future residents. They walk through the main hall on the first floor, which is designed as a large gathering space for everyone to hang out. Hiraku checks out his personal room right off the main hall, and then they cross over to the dining room, complete with a fully equipped kitchen in the back. Hiraku mentions they even set up extra stone stoves outside for heavy cooking. They head down the wooden staircase into the cellar, which features sturdy stone walls and plenty of space for storing excess food and firewood. Moving to the second floor, Lou and Tia are thrilled to finally have their own private rooms, as the temporary housing was getting incredibly crowded with all the new elves. They also discover a strange room with a heavy bolt lock on the door, but Hiraku decides to just ignore it and pretends he never saw it. The group is incredibly happy with the new house, especially the large bathroom, which features a fully functional wooden bathtub. Hiraku tells the elves to let him know if anything needs fixing or adjustments after the winter season passes. To finish up the exterior decorations, he crafts 2 large stone statues of the horned wolves and places them right in front of the main entrance. With the house fully done, Hiraku decides to cook a completely new dish for everyone. He wants to make curry from scratch, avoiding the easy route of using pre-made roux block. Lou is completely shocked and jokingly accuses him of being a savage due to misunderstanding his cooking terminology, but Hiraku just heads out to his crop fields to gather the necessary spices. Thanks to his almighty farming tool, he can easily grow plants that normally cannot survive in their current climate. He harvests cumin first, explaining to the girls that its dried seeds provide the main aromatic base for the curry. Next, he digs up turmeric roots, noting that they give the dish its signature yellow color. He asks the elf girls to use their magic to quickly dry the freshly picked spices out. Moving on to coriander, he plans to grind the seeds into a fine powder for a fresh, fruity scent. He also harvests the green leaves, known as cilantro, and offers a leafy sprig to the wolves. The wolves are instantly repelled by the potent smell and roll around in the dirt in distress. Lou and Tia watch this and realize the plant could be used as a powerful talisman to ward off Inferno Wolf. Finally, Hiraku gathers black pepper and cayenne peppers. He worries briefly that making curry entirely from scratch might make him look too obsessive and annoying to the girls, but he proceeds anyway, setting up all his ingredients on a large outdoor cooking table. Leah is the only one available to help him cook, as Lu and Tia are too busy researching the cilantro's monster-repelling properties. Hiraku starts the cooking process by heating up some extracted rapeseed oil in a large metal pan over a stone stove. He adds chunks of rabbit meat and sears them until they develop a nice color, then takes them off the heat so they do not overcook. He throws the cumin seeds into the pan, cooking them in the leftover meat juices to extract their flavor, while being extremely careful not to burn them. Next, he and Leia sauté finely diced onions, ginger, and garlic until they form a thick, fragrant paste. They add diced tomatoes and continue cooking the mixture down. Hiraku tosses in all the ground spices and some salt, then returns the seared meat and some boiled soybeans to the pot. He pours in water and covers it with a heavy wooden lid to let it simmer until the meat gets perfectly tender. While waiting for the stew to finish, Hiraku suddenly realizes he completely forgot to make naan bread to go with the curry. Quickly calculates how many portions he needs for himself, Lu, Tia, and all the elf girls, realizing it is a massive amount of food. He rapidly kneads a large batch of dough and shows Leah how to roll it out flat with a wooden rolling pin. Since they do not have a traditional oven, he slaps the flattened dough directly onto the outside of a hot, overturned metal pot to bake it. The delicious smell of the cooking food draws the rest of the elves and the wolves out of the forest, and they all gather around the cooking area. By sunset, the massive batch of curry and a huge stack of naan are finally ready. Hiraku serves the food, but the girls are initially hesitant due to the dish's strange brown color and strong aroma. He shows them how to scoop up the curry with the flatbread, and the moment they take a bite, they are completely blown away by the savory, spicy flavor. The tingling sensation is highly addictive, and they all devour their meals with pure bliss. Hiraku also gives some to the wolves, who eagerly eat it despite the intense heat making them sneeze. The food runs out incredibly fast, leaving Hiraku with nothing but scraps, but he promises to experiment with the spice ratios and make more next time. As the weather grows colder, the group starts preparing for winter, knowing they will be stuck indoors once the heavy snow falls. Hiraku stockpiles a massive amount of firewood in the indoor storage shed. He then visits Zabaton, who is preparing to hibernate at the very top of the giant tree. He brings her a basket of potatoes and a cart full of soft white blankets to keep her warm during her long sleep. Leah and the other elves plan to keep working on their forging projects inside their workshop throughout the winter. To ensure they have enough meat to last the season, Hiraku has Lu and Tia use their magic to smoke and dry large slabs of rabbit and boar meat. The wolves try to steal some of the food from the racks, but Hiraku quickly chases them away. For the vegetables, he builds a large wooden structure specifically for snow storage. He places the cabbages and radishes in the upper boxes, leaves the bottom boxes empty to catch any melting water, covers the whole thing with a sheet, and plans to bury it in snow to keep the food fresh all winter. While watching the girls use magic so effortlessly, Hiraku gets inspired to try it himself. He tries to cast a simple fire spell and even attempts to mimic Tia's ability to summon massive stone golems, but he fails completely. Lu reassures him that magic requires intense study and natural talent, and Tia's golem summoning is considered incredibly advanced even among mages. Hiraku feels a bit useless compared to them, but Lu insists that his ability to survive and build a thriving life in this deadly forest makes him the most amazing person there. Soon after, the snow begins to fall heavily, completely blanketing the landscape and forcing everyone inside the new mansion. To keep everyone entertained during the long winter, Hiraku carves several board games out of wood, including reversi, chess, and mahjong. He introduces reversi to the girls, explaining that they just need to surround the opponent's pieces to flip them to their own color. Lu thinks the game sounds far too simple, but Tia points out that simple rules allow for highly complex strategies. Tia challenges Lu to a match, and as the game progresses, Tia realizes she is losing badly. In a fit of frustration, Tia flips the board, scattering the black and white pieces everywhere. When Lu complains about her terrible sportsmanship, Tia casually uses her magic to perfectly levitate all the pieces back into their exact previous positions on the grid, completely bypassing the reset attempt. Later, Hiraku checks on another game and is shocked to find the two massive wolves, Kuro and Yuki, playing chess against each other perfect. Lu arrogantly challenges them to a match, assuming an animal cannot beat her, but she gets completely destroyed and ends up sulking in the corner in utter defeat. Determined to avenge Lu's humiliating loss, Hiraku sets up a game of mahjong against Tia, Leah, and he assumes the wolf will absolutely not be able to understand such a complicated tile-matching game. However, as the match nears its end, Kuro suddenly declares a winning move. Hiraku is completely stunned to realize the wolf just scored a Yakuman, specifically the extremely rare and difficult 13 Orphan's Hand. Hiraku loses all his points immediately, and Kuro is declared the ultimate champion of the house. Realizing that sitting around playing board games all day is making them lazy, Hiraku carves a miniature bowling set to get them moving. When Lu asks why they should want to knock the wooden pins down, Hiraku paints comical, villainous faces on them, labeling them as scam artists, arsonists, and serial killers. The girls absolutely love the concept and cheer wildly as Hiraku rolls a wooden ball down a red carpet, knocking the bad guys over with a satisfying crash. They spend the rest of the winter happily bowling, playing tabletop games, and eating massive pots of hot stew together. Before they know it, the snow melts away, and spring finally arrives. Hiraku steps outside to enjoy the warm morning air and discusses his upcoming farming plans with Lu and Tia. They realize that Zabaton should be waking up from her hibernation soon and plan to bring her some leftover potatoes to eat. Suddenly, they hear a strange noise and look up to see a massive red-winged creature diving toward them from the sky. Tia urgently identifies it as a highly dangerous wyvern, and the girls brace for an attack. However, before the beast can even reach the ground, a colossal beam of magical energy shoots up from somewhere in the forest, striking the wyvern directly and instantly vaporizing it into a shower of particles. The beam completely obliterates the wyvern, and the girls are absolutely stunned when they realize it was Hiraku who fired it. He transformed his farming tool into a massive golden spear and unleashed the attack to protect everyone. After the explosion, the group quickly works to put out the small fires caused by the battle. Once the flames are extinguished, they check the surrounding area and confirm that while the crop fields suffered some minor damage, all the buildings are completely fine. Hiraku heads over to the crash site and finds the wyvern's massive body lying motionless on the ground. He asks Lu and Tia if there are a lot of these creatures around. They explain that running into a wyvern this large is an incredibly rare occurrence. Hiraku wonders if someone sent the beast specifically to attack them. The girls dismiss the idea and note that no one would send such a valuable and powerful creature off on its own. This means it was likely just a wild monster acting alone. Hearing this, Hiraku decides to treat the whole ordeal as an unfortunate accident. However, his main concern quickly shifts to something else entirely, and he asks the girls if the wyvern is actually edible. It turns out wyvern meat is considered an extreme delicacy in this world. Legends even say that kings used to send entire armies into wyvern dens just to secure some of the meat, only for the soldiers to be burned alive. Back at the cabin, Hiraku gets to work preparing a massive feast with the wyvern meat. He grills thick wyvern round steaks with various spices, wraps the breast meat in leaves to steam it, and simmers the tail meat into a hearty stew with vegetables. When dinner is served, everyone digs in. Lu is amazed by how tender the meat is, especially since a regular knife could not even pierce the wyvern's skin earlier. Tia happily eats her steak and mumbles about how delicious it is, though Hiraku tells her to swallow her food before talking. He tries a spoonful of the stew and is blown away by the rich broth. He notes that every bite of the tail meat is packed with flavor. During the meal, the girls discuss Hiraku's incredible attack. They realize that none of them could have ever blocked a strike capable of piercing a wyvern's triple-layered magic barrier. They take a moment to appreciate their good fortune and feel blessed to be alive to enjoy such an amazing feast. Hiraku humbly brushes off their praise and is simply happy that everyone is enjoying the food. Meanwhile, far away in the demonic kingdom of Galgardo, news of the wyvern's sudden defeat reaches the Demon Lord's castle. The three Demon Lord generals, Bezel, Randon, and Gratz, are in an absolute panic. They cannot believe that a creature requiring their entire military force to handle was killed in just 2 hits by an unknown attacker on the ground. Randan is especially stressed out because they just finished getting the year's budget approved, and fighting a massive new threat is completely impossible. Driven to despair, Randan slams his hands on the table and declares his resignation before fear and panic spread among the citizens. Bezel tries to stop him from running away from his responsibilities, but the room remains in total chaos. At the same time, high up in a mountain fortress, the gatekeeper dragon named Dryme discusses the event with his subordinate Gucci. They both witness the magical blast from afar. Gucci asks what would happen if Dryme was hit by that attack. The massive blue dragon bluntly admits that the beam would have pierced cleanly right through him. Realizing how completely outmatched they are, Dryme decides that attacking the source of the beam would be foolish. They choose to just ignore it and stay away from the forest entirely. Back at the village, the morning after the feast, Hiraku feels incredibly satisfied but notes that one thing was missing from their amazing meal. He really wants some alcohol to go with his food. Since they are growing grapes, he decides to try making his very own wine. He gathers Lu, Tia, and the elf girls and explains his plan. The girls are thrilled by the idea and immediately head out to the vineyard to harvest all the ripe, dark purple grapes. Once the grapes are collected in wooden baskets, Hiraku sets up a massive wooden vat and a wooden trough. He has the elf girls carefully wash their feet and step into the vat to crush the grapes by stomping on them. The girls are a bit hesitant at first about stepping on something they are going to drink, but Hiraku assures them it is the proper way to make wine. He also mentions that the high elf Lalasha specifically crafted watertight wooden barrels for them to store the juice. The girls start stomping in a circular motion, but they struggle to keep their movements synchronized and end up bumping into each other. To fix their rhythm, one of the elves suggests singing an old working song from their village. They start singing and stepping in unison, quickly finding their pace and having a great time. Even the other girls, including Kazuna, Sylvia, Himakawa, and Eurystia, join in on the fun and take turns stomping the grapes. They manage to process enough grapes to fill 16 massive wooden barrels. Hiraku explains that the natural yeast on the grape skins will cause the juice to ferment over time. Sylvia worries that they might not have made enough, but they are all incredibly excited to finally taste the wine once it is ready. While Hiraku enjoys his peaceful life up in the cosmic realm, the golden god who reincarnated him is currently getting severely scolded by the goddess of agriculture. She is absolutely furious that he accidentally sent an innocent human soul into the deadly forest of death. On top of that, she yells at him for giving Hiraku the holy lance green disguised as a farming tool. She points out that a divine weapon like that should instantly drain a normal human's life force and kill them. The golden god tries to defend himself and argues that Hiraku is doing just fine. He notes that the boy is using it strictly for farming, plus he gave him a super healthy body with fast recovery abilities to handle the strain. However, the goddess is not buying his excuses and calls him completely careless. To make matters worse, she is deeply offended that the wooden statue Hiraku carved to honor the gods depicts her as an old man. The golden god claims that part is not his fault, but the goddess refuses to listen. As punishment for his reckless actions, she binds him in place and declares that he will sit there for 300 years. A month later, back at the village, Hiraku watches as a new visitor arrives. A white-haired vampire girl named Flora suddenly storms out of the woods. She is Lu's sister and immediately rushes over to Lu, crying and saying she came to rescue her. Flora was under the impression that Tia, the infamous angel, had kidnapped Lu and brought her here by force. Lu quickly clears up the misunderstanding and explains that she is actually living here peacefully. She then introduces Hiraku as her husband, the chief of the village, and the master of the giant inferno wolves. Flora is completely shocked to learn that the wolves are actually legendary magical beasts, and that Hiraku was the one who effortlessly killed the wyvern. Realizing she just insulted the leader of this incredibly powerful settlement, Flora panics, drops to the ground, and prostrates herself to apologize for her rude behavior. Hiraku laughs it off and tells her not to worry about it, inviting her to stay and relax with them for a while. That evening, Hiraku prepares a special dinner to make up for the wolves scaring Flora when she first arrived. He serves a hearty meal, and Flora is absolutely captivated by the food. She tries a bowl of soup with white cubes in it and asks what it is. Hiraku explains that it is tofu, which he finally managed to make by processing soybean. He mentions that while the salt broth is good, he really wishes he had miso and soy sauce to flavor his dishes. Flora is confused by the terms, so Hiraku explains that both are made by fermenting soybeans. When Flora asks what fermentation is, Hiraku realizes the people of this world do not understand the concept of microorganisms. He explains that tiny invisible organisms can transform matter without using any magic. Flora shares Lu's deep passion for magical research and is instantly fascinated by the scientific concept of microorganisms causing chemical changes. Her eyes light up and she declares that she has found a brand new subject for her studies. She vows to research fermentation and bring miso and soy sauce to the world. Filled with sudden motivation, Flora hurriedly leaves the village the next morning so she can pack her belongings and officially move in. True to her word, Flora returns to the village a short time later, but she does not come alone. She brings a large group of Oni maids with her, led by a woman named Anne. The maids formally bow and ask Hiraku to put them to work. Flora also brings along several cows so the village can finally have a steady supply of milk to make butter and cheese. Shortly after Flora's arrival, Tia announces that she also needs to leave for a bit. When Tia returns, she brings her own set of subordinates. She introduces 3 heavily armored angel girls named Gran Maria, Kudel, and Coroni to act as the village's security force. Along with the angels, Tia brings a group of muscular green lizardmen, led by a warrior named Daga. Daga presents Hiraku with a wooden cage containing a live chicken, and Hiraku is absolutely thrilled at the prospect of finally having fresh eggs. With all these new arrivals, the village suddenly becomes much more lively and civilized. The Oni maids immediately get to work and expertly dust and wash the massive log house until it sparkles. Hiraku notices that despite their efficiency, the maids only know very basic cooking methods. He decides to teach them how to fry, boil, braise, and steam food, along with proper heat control. The maids are incredibly strong and quick learners. They quickly master the techniques and serve up a gorgeous dinner of killer rabbit with fragrant vegetables. Meanwhile, Tia organizes the angels to patrol the skies and keep watch over the surrounding forest. The lizardmen take charge of all the heavy outdoor labor. They easily move massive logs and speed up the construction of new buildings. Since all the lizardmen look identical, Hiraku has Daga tie a red scarf around his arm so he can tell him apart from the others. Just as Hiraku realizes how massive their population has gotten, Leah runs up to him with even more news. She managed to gather all the remaining high elves who were wandering the forest and brought them to the village. Hiraku sees a massive group of female elves and asks where the men are. Leah plainly states that no male elves survived. She cheerfully adds that they can just start making more now, heavily implying that Hiraku will help them repopulate. Hiraku nervously brushes off the comment and decides not to ask any further questions. A few days later, Hiraku realizes their settlement has grown into a fully functioning town, so he gathers all the faction representatives to officially give it a name. He calls in Daga, Tia, Luia, Zabaton, and Kuro for a meeting. Hiraku suggests they name the village after the forest they are living in. However, the girls inform him that the area is actually called the Forest of Death. Hiraku immediately rejects the idea, noting that the Village of Death sounds incredibly ominous and cursed. After some thought, he leads everyone outside and opens the large wooden doors to reveal the massive glowing tree in the center of their settlement. He announces that from now on, the place will be known as the Great Tree Village. The representatives are awestruck by the sight and completely agree with the new name. To celebrate the official founding of their village, Hiraku throws a massive outdoor party for everyone. They build a giant bonfire, and the maids serve endless trays of delicious food. The highlight of the night comes when they finally crack open the very first batch of wine they made together. Everyone fills their wooden mugs and cheers. During the celebration, the villagers start calling Hiraku the mayor. He tries to say they should hold a proper vote later, but Lu and Tia insist that he is the only one fit for the job since everyone already respects him as their leader. Hiraku eventually gives in and happily accepts the title. The party goes late into the night, with the elves singing and dancing, the wolves passing out from drinking too much wine, and Flora getting drunk and falling asleep on a table. Hiraku sits back and watches his friends enjoy themselves, feeling incredibly grateful for his new life. Tia sits next to him and mentions that she hopes they can all keep living together like this forever. Hiraku agrees, and the two of them clink their mugs together to toast to the bright future of the Great Tree Village. As the seasons shift from winter toward summer, the population of the village continues to grow, and after a brief discussion, the residents officially name their home the Great Tree Village. Hiraku naturally ends up becoming the mayor of the settlement, though his daily routine hardly changes at all. He spends his days tending to the massive fields, harvesting crops like cabbages, eggplants, daikon radishes, and vibrant red tomatoes. One sunny afternoon, while Hiraku is admiring a freshly picked tomato, Tia suddenly flies down from the sky with urgent news. She tells him that a messenger from the demonic kingdom has arrived at the village borders. Hiraku quickly heads out to meet the visitor alongside a small escort of angels, elves, and maids to ensure his safety. The messenger is an older man in a red suit who introduces himself as Beazle. Hiraku steps forward, nervously noting that this is his first real job as the mayor, and introduces himself to the man. Beazle immediately presents a gift to commemorate their meeting. He hands over a wooden chest containing a green potion, which Hiraku accepts gracefully. Beezle then explains that the demon lord wishes to discuss the formal status of their settlement. Lu quietly informs Hiraku that while no one technically owns this specific plot of land, the entire region falls under the demon lord's broader territory. Hiraku immediately worries that the demon lord wants to charge them an outrageous amount of taxes for living there, or even worse, kick them off the property entirely. He considers asking Lu and Tia for advice, but decides he needs to step up and handle his mayoral duties himself. Hoping to show that he has no intention of rebelling against the demonic kingdom, Hiraku offers to pay a portion of their harvest as a tax. He tries to act tough and confidently suggests a tax rate of 10%, though internally he immediately worries that he lowballed the offer too much and might anger the messenger. Surprisingly, Beezle is taken aback but quickly accepts the arrangement without any argument. Hiraku then specifies that they will only pay 10% of their actual grown crops, entirely excluding any of the milk, eggs, honey, or alcohol they produce in the village. He tells Beezle that if the demon lord wants any of those extra items, they will have to negotiate a completely separate trade deal. Beezle eagerly agrees to this condition as well, and officially signs a contract with Hiraku to finalize the deal. To show his goodwill, Hiraku sends Beezle home with a basket of apples wrapped in a white cloth as a parting gift. After Beezle leaves, Hiraku worries that he might have been too aggressive during the negotiation. However, Lu is absolutely thrilled and tells him he did a fantastic job. She explains that typical tax rates under the demon lord are usually around 50 to 60%, making his 10% deal an absolute steal. The elf girls also praise his strategy, noting that by having the tax collectors visit only once a year right before winter, the demonic kingdom will never be able to accurately measure their total production. On top of that, the formal agreement means the village is now officially under the demon lord's protection for an incredibly cheap price. Lu then examines the green potion Beezle brought and reveals it is a rare almighty medicine that can heal any injury. Meanwhile, far away at the demon lord's castle, the situation is completely different. The four great generals, Gratz, Randon, Beezle, and Aris, hold an emergency meeting. Gratz is stunned that a small village managed to defeat a massive wyvern, but Beezle explains that the settlement is actually a terrifying military stronghold. He reveals that during his visit he saw the vampire princess Lu, the angel of annihilation Tia, an entire army of high elves, and a pack of infernal wolves. He adds that his escorts were the infamous killer angels, making him genuinely fear for his life the entire time. Gratz realizes why the wyvern was destroyed so easily. Beezle admits he had no choice but to accept the 10% tax offer, because refusing it would have turned that massive military force into an immediate enemy of the demonic kingdom. He tries to look at the bright side, noting they successfully negotiated peace and even received a gift of fresh fruit. Beezle opens the basket, and the generals are amazed by the quality of the apple. However, Randon suddenly notices the white cloth wrapping the basket. He recognizes it as the silk of a great demon spider, a legendary monster that once fought a previous demon lord to a complete standstill. Realizing the village has a demon spider living with them too, Randon absolutely loses his mind, jumps out of his chair, and screams that he wants to resign from his position before they all get killed. Back at the Great Tree Village, another unexpected guest arrives. A massive blue dragon lands near the fields, terrifying the residents. However, the dragon immediately bows its head respectfully, while its blonde attendant, Gucci, introduces the beast as Drime, the gatekeeper dragon. Drime presents a highly decorated magical sword as a gift to the village. Hiraku feels the sword is a bit too violent for a present, but thanks them anyway and asks why they came. Gucci explains that Drime's lair is located in the mountains to the south, and despite the distance, they consider the Great Tree Village to be their neighbors and simply wanted to offer a formal greeting. Hiraku invites them inside but notes that Drime is far too large to fit into any of the buildings. Gucci agrees and orders Drime to take on his smaller form. The massive dragon transforms in a cloud of smoke, revealing a human form with long dark hair and a mustache. They all head inside, and Hiraku serves them a massive feast along with plenty of their homemade wine. Drime absolutely loves the alcohol and quickly gets completely drunk. He starts shouting that he refuses to go home and wants to live in the village forever, claiming he can just intercept attackers to pay for his rent. Gucci tries to reason with him, reminding him that abandoning his actual lair would cause huge problems for everyone. Seeing that the villagers are getting annoyed, Gucci decides it is time to leave and forcefully drags the drunken dragon away. Before they go, Hiraku gives them a basket of apples as well, which Drime gratefully accepts. After the dragon departs, Hiraku realizes that handling diplomatic relations is becoming incredibly complicated. He gathers the elf girls and explains that they can no longer just greet visitors at the village entrance, but he also does not want strangers walking freely into their personal homes. He suggests building a dedicated guest house for visitors. Initially, he thinks a small cabin for 4 people will be enough, but the elves correct him. They point out that anyone traveling through the dangerous forest will likely arrive in a large group. They suggest building a much larger lodge that can comfortably fit around 30 people, featuring an open dining hall on the first floor for feasts and numerous bedrooms on the second floor. Hiraku loves the idea, and the elves quickly get to work constructing the massive wooden guest house. Once the building is finished, Hiraku decides they need to completely overhaul their welcoming procedures. Previously, the angels would capture any visitors and drag them to the entrance, or the giant spider Zabaton would sound the alarm, causing every villager to grab their weapons and prepare for a massive battle. Realizing this looks more like an ambush than a friendly welcome, Hiraku has the elves forge a silver bell to use as a peaceful visitor signal. He then proposes a small welcoming committee consisting of just himself, Lou, and Tia. However, the others argue that enemies might try to sneak in disguised as friendly guests, so they decide to include a few high elves, ogre maids, and heavily armed lizardmen in the group just to be safe. Flora also volunteers to help, and Hiraku assigns her to keep watch over the guests during the night, since vampires can go days without sleeping. A few days later, the Su system is put to the test when a group of beastmen arrives at the forest's edge. The leader, a purple-haired wolf beastman named Garf, introduces himself and explains that they traveled from Howling Village in the eastern mountains to establish friendly relations. Tia steps forward to welcome them but notices that Garf only brought 3 companions with him. She coldly warns him that any other members of his group hiding in the woods will be treated as hostile enemies. Garf immediately panics and calls out to his remaining people, revealing 2 more beastmen hiding nearby. Tia scolds him for the dangerous stunt, warning him that the village is full of incredibly dangerous people, and they need to behave themselves. She then guides the terrified beastmen to the newly built guest house. The beastmen are amazed by the beautiful lodge and the polite maids greeting them. However, when dinner is served, Hiraku feels a bit bad because the meal consists only of simple vegetable soup, bread, and raw tomatoes. He asks Anne, the head maid, if they are going to offer the guests any wine. Anne firmly states that they are currently treating the beastmen with a lower level of hospitality because they arrived suspiciously and did not bring any gifts. She points out that the dragon brought a magical sword, while the beastmen brought nothing. Hiraku understands the logic but still feels they should show some kindness until they know for sure the beastmen are enemies. He overrides the maid's decision and allows each guest to have exactly 2 cups of wine. The beastmen enthusiastically drink the wine and enjoy the meal. During dinner, Hiraku asks Garf about Howling Village. Garf explains that it is a mountain settlement primarily populated by beastmen, who make a living through hunting and mining. They used to trade their goods with a human village across the mountains, but recent conflicts disrupted that route, forcing them to seek out a new trading partner. They heard about the Great Tree Village from a Demon Kingdom official and decided to make the dangerous trek through the forest. Hiraku is impressed by their dedication, and Garf admits they kept some troops hidden simply to ensure someone could run back to warn their village if things went wrong. Understanding their situation, Hiraku completely forgives them for the deception and for not bringing a gift. He assures Garf that the thought counts more than the actual value of a present. They move on to trade negotiations, and Garf explains that Howling Village does not use currency, preferring a simple barter system. Hiraku is relieved since his village does not have any currency either. Garf proposes trading their mined ore, crafted glassworks, paints, and silverware in exchange for the Great Tree Village's surplus food crops. Hiraku excitedly agrees to the deal, eager to get his hands on proper utensils and tools. However, Garf mentions that carrying the heavy goods back and forth through the dangerous forest will be incredibly difficult. Hiraku briefly considers using his Inferno wolves to pull carts, but ultimately comes up with a better idea. A few days later, it is time for the first official trade mission. Since Hiraku is the mayor, his advisors tell him he cannot leave the village, so Tia draws the winning lot to lead the expedition. Instead of walking, Hiraku cashes in a favor with Drime. In exchange for a single barrel of wine, the massive gatekeeper dragon agrees to act as their personal transport. Tia and the muscular green lizardmen load their heavy sacks of food onto Drime's back and fly directly to Howling Village. The beastmen are absolutely terrified when a massive dragon suddenly lands in their settlement, but Tia quickly calms them down and sets up her market. At first, the beastmen are hesitant to approach the foreign food, but Tia uses the concept of free samples to let them taste the produce. The beastmen are blown away by the incredible flavors and immediately swarm the stalls, trading away all their crafts and even buying the extra wine Tia brought for herself. The trade mission is a massive success, and Tia returns to the Great Tree Village to report the results to Hiraku. She mentions that the mayor of Howling Village was so impressed that he asked if some of his people could permanently relocate to the Great Tree Village. Since they desperately need more hands for farming, Hiraku agrees. However, Tia reveals that the 20 people wanting to move are all young women. Hiraku realizes that his village has a massive gender imbalance, with almost no men around to help build the future generation. He tells Tia that he will accept all 20 women, but only on the condition that Howling Village sends at least 2 men along with them. Shortly after, the new residents arrive, led by a nervous beastkin girl named Senna. She immediately bows and begs Hiraku not to abandon them, promising they will work as hard as possible. Hiraku warmly welcomes them and tells them to take their time getting used to their new homes. Senna then excitedly announces that they fulfilled his condition and brought 3 males with them. She steps aside to reveal 3 very young children. Hiraku is completely stunned, realizing he cannot put children to work or rely on them to fix the village's demographic issues right now. The elf girls watch the children carefully and start calculating in their heads, eventually deciding that they can just wait 5 or 10 years for the boys to grow up so they can finally secure the future of the village. As the new beastmen from Howling Village start settling into their new homes, Lemulius takes charge as their housing manager and assures them that they can ask her for anything they need. The beastmen are incredibly nervous because they expect to be treated horribly, but Lemulius and the others make sure they feel welcome. However, there is still one major problem with the new residents. Every time they walk around the village, they keep fainting out of pure terror whenever they see the giant spiders and the dark wolves. Hiraku watches them pass out and figures they will just have to get used to the environment eventually. Later on, Senna and the other beastman kids are playing around in the dirt. Suddenly, Senna uses a bright magic spell. Hiraku is completely caught off guard and asks if she can really use magic. Senna confirms it, and Hiraku realizes that he is actually the only person in the entire village who cannot use any magic at all. He starts thinking about it and remembers that the angels, the high elves, the lizardmen, and the maids all use magic for their daily farming chores. Even the spiders, the wolves, the slimes, and the bees easily cast elemental spells to put out fires or split themselves apart. Senna notices Hiraku looking a bit down and tries to comfort him by saying they can practice together, but he already feels like the little kids will surpass him in no time. He decides there is no point in wishing for the impossible and promises himself to just focus on his own farming duties. Suddenly, a massive earthquake shakes the entire forest. Tia rushes over to Hiraku and frantically reports that a giant grappler bear and a bloody viper are fighting each other in the northern woods. Hiraku is surprised that their fight is causing the ground to shake so much, and Tia warns him that the battle might destroy the village if they do not intervene. Hiraku agrees but immediately asks Tia if she thinks the giant monsters taste good. Tia is taken aback but admits she has heard hunters eat bear meat before. Hiraku tells her he wants to try it, so Tia grabs him and flies them straight over the forest to the battleground. They find the massive bear and the giant horned snake roaring at each other. Hiraku asks Tia to drop him down quickly. He charges in with his farming tool and completely wipes out both monsters in a single devastating strike. Tia and the other angels are absolutely stunned by his raw power. The lizardmen help drag the massive carcasses back to the village. Hiraku immediately gets to work in the kitchen and decides to cook the monster. First, he chops up the bear meat, throws in some herbs, and braises the whole thing in their precious homemade wine. The maids watch in absolute horror as he dumps their valuable alcohol into the pot, but Hiraku insists it is a normal cooking method. When the dish is finally done, he takes a bite but realizes the bear meat is incredibly gamey. He then moves on to the snake. He slices it up, coats it, and deep fries it. The girls eagerly try the fried viper meat and are amazed that it tastes exactly like fried chicken. Hiraku agrees but feels like the dish is missing a specific condiment. He realizes he needs to make some mayonnaise, since he wants to experiment with fermentation and needs to kill off any harmful bacteria for his recipes. He visits Flora's laboratory. He asks her if she has any antibacterial medicine that is safe to consume. Flora gets extremely excited and initially offers him an explosive potion that can blast anything over the mountains, but Hiraku asks for something much more peaceful. She then hands him a safe, clear medicine that works perfectly. Hiraku thanks her and asks how her miso production is going. Flora admits she has failed completely and has already accidentally blown up her hut 3 times while trying to ferment the ingredient. Hiraku promises to help her try again but begs her to keep the explosives to a minimum. First, they focus on making the mayonnaise. Hiraku gathers some fresh eggs, cracks them into a bowl, and mixes the yolks. He adds salt and apple vinegar, slowly pouring in oil while stirring the mixture until it turns into a thick, creamy mayonnaise. He serves it alongside the fried snake meat, and it tastes perfect. Flora loves the mayonnaise so much that she starts eating it straight out of the bowl with a wooden spoon. But Hiraku quickly scolds her and tells her to stop because it is terrible for her health. Next, they move on to the miso. They boil a large pot of soybeans and then crush them into a thick paste using wooden pestles. After mashing the beans, they mix in the koi mold and salt, forming the dough into small balls. Hiraku packs the dough tightly into wooden barrels. Flora mentions that her previous attempts failed, and Hiraku admits he actually used his magical farming tool to help create the perfect mold while chanting a weird spell. They carry the heavy barrels down into the cellar and set stones on top of them. Hiraku explains that they just have to wait a few months for the miso to mature and develop intense flavors. Flora loves the idea of waiting patiently, comparing it to her own long research projects. Suddenly, Lemulius runs down into the cellar and announces that some visitors have arrived. Hiraku heads upstairs and meets a group of elder dwarves wearing thick fur coats. Their leader, Donovan, explains that they traveled a long way because they heard rumors about the village's high-quality alcohol. He humbly asks Hiraku to share some with them. The girls immediately protest, reminding Hiraku that their wine is incredibly valuable and they cannot just give it away for free. Donovan admits they do not have any money to pay for it, but they possess a lifetime of brewing technology and expertise. He notices the village's vibrant crops and promises to help them brew even better alcohol. Hiraku loves the idea and accepts their offer. Donovan and his men immediately get to work with the harvested corn. They mash the grains and set up a complex copper distillation apparatus. Soon enough, they produce a batch of crystal-clear corn whiskey. Hiraku takes a small sip and is instantly hit by the overwhelming strength of the alcohol, prompting Donovan to laugh and call him a lightweight. The dwarves officially join the village as the resident brewers. To celebrate the arrival of the beastmen and the dwarves, Hiraku throws a massive welcome party in the grand dining hall. Everyone drinks the new alcohol and enjoys the feast. During the party, Drime sneaks in just to get drunk again, but Gucci quickly catches him and ties him up with ropes. Hiraku sits down with Donovan and quietly asks if any of the young women in the village have caught his eye, hoping to finally get some adult men to start families. Donovan looks around and admits the girls are all very pretty, but they are way too young for him. He then confesses that he is only attracted to women who can grow thick beards. Hiraku feels completely defeated by the cultural differences and gives up on playing matchmaking. A few days later, Hiraku is working in the forest when he suddenly spots a massive black dragon flying straight toward the village alongside 2 smaller ones. Assuming it is another monster attack, Hiraku readies his spear and unleashes a massive blast of energy. He misses the black dragon but accidentally hits one of the smaller white ones. Gucci suddenly runs out of the woods, waving his arms frantically and begging Hiraku to stop attacking. Hiraku pauses and the dragons land. The white dragon transforms into Grafaloon, Drimewife, and the black dragon transforms into a blonde girl with dark horns named Lastismoon. Grafaloon explains that Drime kept sneaking out of their castle in the middle of the night and stealing valuable treasures from their vault. She assumed he was having an affair and came here to obliterate the village. However, she now realizes he was just bringing gifts to pay for his drinking habits. She apologizes for almost burning the village down, and Hiraku apologizes for attacking them. After everything is settled, Grafaloon pulls Lastismoon aside. She quietly explains that Hiraku's power is absolutely terrifying and that he could easily wipe out their entire race. She orders Lastismoon to stay in the village permanently as a diplomat to ensure Hiraku never turns his unbelievable strength against the dragon. Lastismoon agrees and introduces herself to Hiraku as Lasti. Hiraku gladly welcomes her and suggests she help with the harvesting. However, Lasti is way too strong. She tries to pick tomatoes but accidentally crushes them into juice. She tries to use magic on the apples, but she ends up causing massive explosions that ruin the fruit. On top of that, her mere presence terrifies all the cows, chickens, and wolves, completely halting the village's milk and egg production. Realizing she is not suited for farm work, Hiraku decides to make her the official diplomat instead. Soon after, Beazle arrives at the guest house to negotiate their trade agreements. Lasti sits across from him and cheerfully asks if he wants to buy more oranges. Beazle is absolutely terrified of her dragon presence and stammers that he just wants a few. Lasti aggressively smiles and suggests he buy strawberries, apples, pears, persimmons, and watermelons too. Beazle is so scared that he immediately agrees to buy 10 boxes of everything without hesitation. Lasti successfully handles the transaction, proving she is actually great at her new job. Meanwhile, back at the Demon Lord's castle, the council holds an emergency meeting. They are completely panicked because they just found out the village now has a legendary dragon working for them. Beazle warns the council that the village's military power is growing too fast, and they need to monitor them without causing an incident. He decides to send his own daughter Florim to act as a spy. Florim accepts the mission, confident in her magical abilities, and flies straight to the village. When she arrives, Lasti greets her at the gate. Florim recognizes Lasti as the infamous dragon and immediately assumes Lasti is the mastermind running the village's military forces. Lasti gets distracted by a messenger, giving Florim the perfect opportunity to sneak away and scout the area on her own. As Florim creeps through the forest, she starts analyzing their defenses. She spots the muscular lizardmen, the skilled beastmen, and the veteran dwarf. She then peers into a window and sees the vampire princess Lucy mixing volatile explosive potions. Moving further, she spots Tia and the trio of killer angels discussing their aerial defense strategy. She then sees the high elves and remembers the terrifying rumors about them kidnapping and eating young men. Florim realizes that fighting just 5 high elves would be too much for the demon army, but this village has dozens of them. Finally, she spots a massive combined pack of infernal wolves and demon spiders working together. All her confidence completely shatters, and she realizes the demon kingdom stands absolutely no chance against this place. She assumes Lasti must be the supreme commander to control so many legendary monsters. While wandering in a daze, Florim runs into Hiraku, who is carrying a hammer and some plants. Hiraku asks if she is lost, but Florim assumes he's just a weak, ordinary human servant. She aggressively brushes him off, telling him she does not need help from a lowly human. Later that day, Florim talks to Lasti and asks who the human with the hammer was. Lasti casually mentions that he is the mayor of the village and the one who defeated her mother. Florim freezes in absolute horror, realizing she just insulted the most powerful being in the entire region. From that moment on, Florim officially moves into the village but acts incredibly polite, terrified, and respectful every single time she crosses paths with Hiraku. Sometime later, the slimes that Tia brought to the village to purify the wastewater start multiplying and evolving into various different colors. The creatures are completely harmless, so Hiraku ignores them until one day, a red slime manages to sneak into the storage room and drinks an entire barrel of the village's precious alcohol. Lasti, Florim, and the elves discover the empty barrel and are absolutely furious. They drag the blushing slime out and demand a severe punishment for stealing their property. The girls suggest extremely harsh options, like burning the slime with fire magic, drying it out in the sun, or locking it in solitary confinement. Hiraku feels bad for the small creature and steps in to calm everyone down, arguing that a simple slime would not even understand the concept of punishment. He officially acquits the slime of all charges, and from that day on, the slime becomes a regular guest at their village feasts. Soon after, the autumn season arrives, bringing cooler weather and a massive harvest of fresh vegetable. Hiraku takes advantage of the bountiful crops and cooks a massive mushroom and vegetable hot pot for everyone to enjoy. The Beast Girls and the elves absolutely love the meal, but Hiraku casually mentions that the hot pot would taste much better if they had access to seafood. The The girls have never heard of seafood, so Hiraku explains that he wants to make a chanko hot pot using cod, crabs, monkfish, and a special broth made from kombu seaweed. Hearing about delicious new food instantly motivates the girls to take action. Florem uses her magic screen to research the ingredients and discovers that a port city named Shashato inside the demonic kingdom handles a massive amount of ocean product. Lasty and Florem immediately volunteer to fly out to the city and find a merchant who can supply them with the seafood. 3 days later, they return to the village with Michael Gorun, the president of the largest trading company in Shashato. Michael presents a massive haul of fresh fish on ice and promises to gather all the kombu they need, noting that fishermen usually throw the seaweed away anyway. Michael explains that he has 3 main goals for his visit. First, he wants to properly greet Hiraku and thank him for the business. Second, he wants to suggest more trading opportunities between them. Finally, he asks to become the village's official government purveyor so he can exclusively handle all their external trade. Michael promises that he can multiply their profits by selling their highly enticing crops on the open market. Hiraku reviews Michael's product list and agrees to the partnership. As they finish their negotiations, Michael suddenly spots Drime looming behind the group. He screams in absolute terror at the sight of the massive dragon, hastily excuses himself, and immediately flies away on his dragon escort. The story then shifts back 3 days to reveal how Michael got involved in the first place. In his office in Shashato, Michael is incredibly busy when his assistant informs him that some VIPs arrived without an appointment. Michael is annoyed and tells his assistant to send them away, but a strong merchant intuition suddenly warns him that he cannot ignore these guests. He decides to meet them and is completely shocked to find Florem and Lasty waiting for him. Michael recognizes Lasty as the crazy dragon from one of the most powerful families in the kingdom and initially views trading with her as a massive risk. However, Lasty presents several baskets filled with rare high-quality fruits and crops from the village. Michael realizes the goods can fetch a fortune, so his greed quickly overrides his fear. He eagerly agrees to find them the seafood they want, and even volunteers to personally deliver the items to the Forest of Death. Lasty gives him a ride on a flying beast, and Michael spends the entire journey screaming in terror. Upon arriving at the village, Michael is horrified to find the area guarded by illegal demon spiders, killer angels, vampires, and an inferno wolf. Despite being internally paralyzed by fear and constantly watched by giant dragons, Michael forces a fake smile and manages to successfully complete the trade negotiation. On his flight back home, he feels relieved to have secured the best deal of his life, but he admits that the extreme stress of dealing with the terrifying villagers might ruin his health. Back in the present, Hiraku uses the fresh ingredients Michael brought to cook an authentic seafood hot pot. The entire village gathers around the table, and the girls are completely starstruck by the incredible flavor. Hiraku thoroughly enjoys his meal and decides that he will ask Michael to bring shrimp and squid next time. Sometime later, Hiraku is working in the fields when he spots a massive white dragon hovering in the sky above the village. He assumes the dragon is related to Drime and watches as the angel squad flies up to intercept it. The angels charge at the dragon with their spears, but the beast effortlessly dodges their attacks and blasts the forest with a powerful magical explosion. Hiraku decides he has to intervene before the dragon destroys the village. He grabs a wooden spear, takes aim, and hurls it straight into the sky. The spear scores a direct hit on the dragon's head, completely knocking it out of the air. The dragon crashes violently into the forest, sending up a massive plume of dust. Hiraku rushes over to the crash site and finds the dragon surrounded by the horned wolves. The dragon quickly transforms into a white-haired woman and immediately surrenders to Hiraku. Drime arrives at the scene and introduces the woman as his older sister Hakuren. Hakuren explains that she came to the village specifically to vent her anger and test Hiraku's strength. She reveals that Drime drunkenly promised to marry Lasty off to Hiraku in the future. Since Lasty is 900 years younger than Hakuren, the ancient dragon felt incredibly humiliated that her young niece found a husband before her. Hiraku scolds Drime for making such a ridiculous promise while drunk, and then forces Hakuren to clean up all the broken logs in the forest as punishment for throwing a destructive tantrum. After finishing her chores, Hakuren decides to stay in the village for the time being. She quickly fits in with the residents and joins them for a feast in the tavern. During the meal, she suggests playing a game of mahjong. Hiraku agrees to play, but Hakuren insists on betting something to make the game more exciting. Since Hiraku does not have any money or valuables to bet, Drime suggests establishing a punishment for the loser instead. They eventually agree to play a high-stakes game of strip mahjong. Harem, Lasty, and Drime all sit down at the table with Hiraku, and the dragons immediately unleash their intense competitive natures. They refuse to accept defeat, and Hiraku starts losing round after round. He quickly loses almost all his clothing and begins to panic. He suspects the dragons are using telekinesis to rewrite the wooden tiles, or using magic to see through the pieces, but he eventually realizes he is just overthinking his bad luck. Hiraku finally gets a chance to turn things around and build a massive winning hand, but Hakurin completely crushes his strategy and wins the game before he can make his move. Hiraku accepts his defeat, and Hakuren enthusiastically leads the rest of the girls in a chant, demanding that he take off his pants. Hiraku nervously complies, stripping down completely while the crowd cheers for his humiliation. Meanwhile, at the Demon Lord's castle, Bezel reports the terrifying news that the ancient dragon Hakurin has officially joined the Great Tree Village. General Randon realizes that the village has amassed enough legendary monsters to effortlessly conquer the entire country. The sheer terror of the situation breaks him, and he immediately writes a resignation letter before fleeing the castle to save his own life. However, Demon Lord Galgardo completely ignores the impending crisis because he is too distracted by his own daughter's rebellious phase, complaining that she barely speaks to him anymore. Back in the village, Hakurin constantly complains about doing manual labor and gives up on digging holes after her first day. To keep her busy and productive, Hiraku assigns her the role of the village teacher. Hakurin stands in front of a classroom full of beastmen children and enthusiastically teaches them reading, writing, and math using visual aids on a wooden board. However, she later admits to the kids that her only true motivation for teaching them is so they can handle all the hard work in the future, allowing her to slack off permanently. Hiraku watches her teach and realizes her motivation is completely selfish, but he decides to let it slide since she is actually doing a decent job educating the children. Sometime later, a group of topless Lamia women slither into the village and desperately beg for their lives. They present a sword and a chest full of blue magic crystals as a peace offering. Hiraku and Florum are completely confused by the sudden arrival. The Lamias explain that the young horned wolves from the village recently discovered a dungeon deep in the forest and accidentally cleared out all the monsters inside. Since the Lamias lived in that dungeon, they were forced to flee their home to avoid the rampaging wolves. Hiraku feels terrible about the misunderstanding and decides to help the displaced women. He agrees to continuously trade the village's fresh crops for the blue magic crystals the Lamias mine. However, he also politely asks the topless women to start wearing clothes when they visit the village, because he has a very hard time not staring at them. The Lamias gladly accept the trade agreement and establish the Lamia delivery service. They use their impressive strength to transport the village's heavy trading goods through the forest. Thanks to the new delivery service and the merchants' powerful connections, the village's trade network expands massively, bringing in huge profits and resources. However, the rapidly growing influence of the village catches the attention of a neighboring kingdom. Inside a grand castle, Princess Yuri reviews intelligence reports about the village's expanding trade and military power. Her advisors convince her that the village is planning a foul attack on their kingdom, and that Florum is being held hostage as leverage. Determined to save Florum and eliminate the perceived threat, Princess Yuri orders her subordinates to immediately gather all their troops and prepare for a full-scale assault on the Great Tree Village. Meanwhile, Bezel informs Florum that the demonic kingdom is amassing military might and planning something foul. He explains that Princess Yuri believes Florum is being held as a hostage, so the princess is gathering troops to launch a military campaign to save her. Florum is completely shocked by the news, and immediately goes to speak with Hiraku about the situation. She explains that while she was away, 3 politically powerful noble girls named Rosalind, Klakase, and Roaju took the opportunity to fill the princess's head with half-truths. Hiraku is confused and points out that he sent them plenty of reports detailing how ridiculously powerful the village is. Florum notes that the reports were likely so extreme that the nobles assumed they were entirely unrealistic. She adds that she tried to have Demon Lord Galgardo stop the invasion, but he is far too soft on his daughter to intervene. Florum warns Hiraku that the noble trio plans to attack the village tomorrow with a force of 300 men. She suggests asking someone from the village to rout the forces so they give up and go home, but she emphasizes the need for caution. If the more aggressive villagers find out about the attack, they will likely retaliate and violently destroy the entire demonic kingdom. Florum concludes that they just need to show the invaders the massive difference in military might, without actually mobilizing the village's main forces. Hiraku agrees to the plan. The next day, the army of 300 armored knights arrives in the forest, but their invasion is instantly halted when a massive magical explosion strikes the area. The surviving knights immediately surrender and beg for their lives, completely terrified by the overwhelming power. The 3 noble girls are captured and brought to the village. Florum assigns them to do office work, and the trio is so traumatized by the display of power that they eagerly agree to work like their lives depend on it just to avoid being executed. Hiraku is a bit unnerved by how terrified they act, but Florum assures him that they will be incredibly useful for handling the massive mountain of paperwork the village has accumulated. She even casually tells Hiraku to dispose of the girls if they cause any trouble, which terrifies the noble trio even further. Shortly after, Princess Yuri herself arrives at the village to observe the situation and check on Florum's living conditions. Florum firmly tells the princess that she will receive no special treatment and will simply be treated as a commoner named Yuri while she stays in the village. Yuri gladly accepts the condition, mentioning that it has been a long time since anyone called her by her actual name. Florum then takes Yuri and the 3 noble girls on a grand tour of the village. The group is completely amazed as they observe the advanced farming techniques, the water wheel, and the massive apple orchards. The noble girls realize that the village is an absolute goldmine and quietly whisper among themselves about escaping or eventually taking over the land to make a fortune for their kingdom. However, their plotting is instantly cut short when they encounter the village's terrifying residents. They are paralyzed with fear after seeing the massive inferno wolves and are completely traumatized when Zabaton easily subdues them with her webs. After learning their lesson, the 3 noble girls quickly return to their office work and promise to never cause trouble again. Meanwhile, Yuri continues her tour and watches Florum casually play with one of the deadly inferno wolves. Yuri is stunned by how peaceful the village actually is and realizes how ignorant she was about the outside world. She feels terrible for trying to bring war to such a tranquil place. Florum agrees and states that anyone who takes up arms against the village should expect to be incinerated by dragonfire. Yuri then admits that she thought the intel about dragons living in the village was just a lie meant to deceive them. She angrily blames Florum for the entire situation, complaining that Florum vanished from the demonic kingdom without a word and stopped acting like her childhood friend. Yuri confesses that she was genuinely worried that Florum had been taken hostage and just wanted to save her. Florum feels guilty upon hearing this and apologizes for making her worry, promising to keep Yuri informed from now on. The 2 girls reconcile and head back to the lodge for dinner. The 3 noble girls also adapt to their new lives, realizing that doing paperwork in the village is much better than dealing with the stressful political conflicts back home. They absolutely love the delicious food and the relaxing bath. Soon after, Yuri decides to join the villagers in their manual labor. The noble girls are horrified to see the princess doing commoner work, but Yuri insists on helping out. The trio reluctantly joins her, and they all work alongside the beastkin and elves to harvest the wheat crops. They then use the harvested wheat to bake fresh bread and enjoy a massive feast with the rest of the village. Yuri thoroughly enjoys the experience and learns a lot during her stay. Eventually, Bezel arrives to teleport Yuri back to the demonic kingdom. Yuri politely thanks Hiraku and the villagers for their hospitality and promises to visit again. The villagers gift her a basket of the bread they baked together as a parting present. However, when it is time to leave, the 3 noble girls flatly refuse to go home. They insist that they still have much to learn and want to stay in the village to continue working and repaying everyone's kindness. Hiraku is fine with this arrangement, so Yuri and Bezel teleport away without them. Back at the Demon Lord's castle, Bezel reports to Galgardo that Yuri has returned. He notes that she is acting much more dignified and is incredibly busy every day, completely ignoring her father. Demon Lord Galgardo completely misunderstands the situation and panics, assuming that his daughter's sudden maturity means she found a boyfriend. He furiously unleashes his magical aura and threatens to tear the mysterious man apart himself. Bezel quickly calms the enraged Demon Lord down, warning him that his aggressive attitude will only make Yuri hate him. He then reminds Galgardo that they have a meeting to attend and suggests they go show Yuri how cool her father can be. Back in the village, the autumn season brings a massive pre-winter harvest. The yield of radishes is so huge that they quickly run out of storage space. Hiraku decides to share the extra food with their allies, and Lasti suggests sending some to her grandparents. She explains that her grandfather is the Emperor Dragon Doze in the northern continent, and her grandmother is the Hurricane Dragon Raymalin in the southern continent. Hiraku is surprised by their intense titles but agrees to the plan. He sends Lasti and Hakurin to deliver the crops. Lasti also stops by Shishido City to drop off goods for the merchant Michael Gorun. During her visit, Michael asks Lasti for a favor, requesting that she exterminate a giant sea monster that has been attacking his trade ships. Lasti eagerly accepts the job and completely obliterates the massive tentacled sea monster with a powerful beam of magical energy. She brings the monster's meat back to the village, and Hiraku recognizes it as a rare delicacy called chanko. He immediately uses the meat to cook a massive seafood hot pot for the entire village to enjoy. Meanwhile, Hakurin returns from her delivery up north and brings back a group of dark-skinned mountain elves led by a girl named Ya. Hakurin explains that she found the mountain elves struggling to survive and invited them to live in the village. Ya introduces her people, explaining that they can use fire magic and prefer eating meat over vegetables. Hiraku gladly welcomes them to the village and promises to figure out their housing situation. Ya is incredibly grateful for his kindness and immediately volunteers to hunt for their own food to prove their worth. However, her hunting attempts end in complete disaster. She accidentally triggers the village's defensive pit traps and gets launched into the air while trying to catch rabbits and boars. Covered in dirt and completely embarrassed, Ya apologizes to Hiraku for being entirely useless. Hiraku tells her not to worry and asks what she is trying to make with the pile of dark clay she gathered. Ya explains that she wants to make pottery for the village. Hiraku helps her build a small outdoor kiln, but when they try to fire the clay, the bowls completely crack and fall apart into ash. They realize the local soil is just not suitable for pottery. Determined to be useful, Ya insists on searching the surrounding areas for better clay. She confidently states that, as mountain elves, her people understand the earth perfectly and know exactly where to look. Hiraku allows her to go but warns her to be careful and avoid fighting any monster. A short while later, Ya successfully finds high-quality clay and crafts a large batch of perfect pottery jars, plates, and cups for the village. Hiraku is highly impressed by her hard work and praises her efforts. Around the same time, the village's survey party discovers a new dungeon up in the northern mountain. The elf girls return to the village and report that the dungeon is inhabited by a dangerous monster known as a blood viper. The elves are incredibly intense about the discovery and demand that they send an extermination party to hunt the creature down immediately. Hiraku asks why they are so desperate for the blood viper, and the elves explain that the monster's meat is extremely valuable. Eating it massively increases a person's vitality, improves relations between husbands and wives, and greatly boosts the chances of having children. The dark-skinned elves are completely obsessed with the idea of securing the meat for the survival of their clan, blushing heavily at the prospect of starting families. Hiraku is a bit overwhelmed by their intense enthusiasm and suggests that they discuss the hunt with the rest of the village before making any rash decisions. As autumn slowly fades into winter, the villagers finally complete the construction of a new men's bathhouse. Hiraku is thrilled to have a proper place for the men, the dwarves, the lizardmen, and Drime to relax. However, one evening, 3 of the young maids try to sneak into the men's bathhouse with the explicit intention of washing Hiraku's back to get romantically closer to him. Before they can enter the water, Florum catches them in the corridor. She scolds them severely, reminding them that they are the lowest-ranking members of the village and cannot simply bypass everyone else to sneak their way to the top. The maids are terrified of being disposed of and frantically apologize for their actions. Florum gives them one final warning to behave and sends them away. Sometime later, the cold winter weather settles over the village. Hiraku hears that Lu is not feeling well and goes to her cabin to check on her. He is surprised to find the usually energetic vampire completely bedridden. Lu insists that it is nothing serious and assumes she just caught a mild cold. Hiraku is highly concerned because he has never had to make medicine for himself or the villagers before and does not know how to treat her. Lu lists her symptoms, explaining that she has a slight fever, some nausea, and absolutely no appetite for normal food. She adds that she finds herself intensely craving sour things like tomatoes and fruits. Senna, who is standing nearby, suddenly speaks up and mentions that someone in her old howling village had the exact same symptoms. Hiraku curiously asks what happened to that person and if they recovered. Lu is also confused by the question, but Senna casually explains that everyone simply congratulated the person on having a baby. Hiraku is completely stunned by the sudden realization that Lu's symptoms are actually signs of pregnancy. Hiraku starts his day a bit later than the maid. He does this intentionally to give them time to prepare without feeling rushed. He meets with Anne to get his morning report. She tells him that the wine slime sneaked into the storage room and drank an entire barrel of alcohol. Hiraku is not mad because they left that specific barrel out as a decoy to keep the slime away from their main supply. He considers the trap a complete success. Later, Hiraku heads to the dining hall for breakfast. Since the village has grown so much, they have to eat in 3 separate shifts. Hiraku eats in the first group alongside Lu and Flora. Lu is doing great with her pregnancy, but Flora looks entirely exhausted. She is completely sleep-deprived and constantly mumbles about microorganisms. Hiraku asks her what she is doing, and Flora explains she is struggling to ferment miso properly. She holds up a flask of weird pink liquid, claiming she is only 20% done with the taste testing and just needs to add more ingredients to the batch. Hiraku begs her to stop and go to sleep. After breakfast, Gran Maria gives her security report. She tells Hiraku that a group of killer rabbits tried to invade the village, but Kuro and the rest of the wolf pack easily eliminated them. Hiraku is glad because they can use the rabbits for meat. He watches the angel guards relaxing and notes that they are incredibly lazy on their days off. They rely entirely on the lizard men and the maids to cook their food and wash their laundry, but Hiraku does not mind since they work hard to patrol the skies when they are on duty. Hiraku then heads out to the fields to do his daily farming chores. He spots some weird fuzzy black pests crawling on the vegetable leaves. Since normal bugs do not exist in this world, Zabaton's spider children and the wolves help him track down these magical pests. Hiraku transforms his almighty farming tool into a watering can. The magical water instantly eliminates the pests without harming the plants. He checks on the massive eggplants, green beans, and striped gourds, feeling incredibly proud of how large the farm has become. At noon, Hiraku sits under a massive tree to eat lunch with the elves, beastkin, and lizardmen. The elves are still amazed that they get to eat lunch every single day. Before coming to the village, they struggled to survive in the forest and rarely had enough food for even one meal a day. Hiraku promises himself that he will never let them go hungry again. During the meal, Daga approaches Hiraku and reports that the cows just gave birth to calves, so they need to increase their daily feed allowance. Hiraku approves the request. Then, the elves inform him that their crop storage room is almost completely full. They suggest contacting Florum and the merchant Michael to sell off the excess harvest. Hiraku agrees and tells them to work out the details. After lunch, Hiraku gets back to work. He uses his farming tool to till new fields and magically grow decorative yellow tulips around the village to make the place look more civilized. He also uses the tool as a rasp to carve small wooden toys and building blocks for the beastkin children to play with. Later in the afternoon, Hiraku joins the village combat training session. The maids swing their wooden swords with intense dedication. They complain that eating so much delicious food every day is making their uniforms fit tighter, so they are desperate to burn off the calories to avoid replacing their sacred maid outfits. Hiraku realizes he is also getting a bit out of shape and tries to spar with a wooden dummy. However, he struggles to use a normal sword. An elf girl lets him try throwing her daggers, but he shatters the weapons on impact because he has no affinity for regular weapons. He decides to stick to his magical spear. To test his strength, he delivers a simple kick to the training dummy. The impact unleashes a massive burst of magical energy that completely obliterates the upper half of the wooden target and sends it flying into the air. The sheer power shocks Leah and the others watching him, but Hiraku just feels confused about when he would ever actually use that kind of explosive strength. When evening arrives, Hiraku heads to the lodge for dinner. Anne serves him a new dish, consisting of simmered killer rabbit covered in a sweet honey sauce. When Hiraku asks how confident she is in the recipe, Anne admits she is only about 20% sure it tastes good. Hiraku gets nervous and asks her to only serve dishes she is confident about, but Anne flatly refuses. She firmly states that they cannot afford to waste any food just because it is experimental. Hiraku accepts his fate, forces himself to eat the incredibly sweet meat, and gives Anne a thumbs up to show his appreciation. During the meal, a maid hands Hiraku a letter from Princess Yuri. The princess requests another shipment of apples and demands that Zabaton make her more custom dresses. Hiraku finds the princess too demanding and plans to tell her to stop making requests. However, the other girls point out that Zabaton actually loves making clothes for people, so Hiraku decides to let it slide. After dinner, Hiraku heads to the men's bathhouse. He relaxes in the hot spring alone and feels incredibly grateful that he forced the village to build a separate bathhouse for the guys so he could finally bathe in peace. Once he is clean, he heads back to his cabin to read a book before bed. However, he suddenly feels a strange presence watching him. He calls out, and several elf girls immediately pop out of hidden trapdoors in his floor, walls, and ceiling. They explain that they are just standing guard to keep him safe, but Hiraku feels completely violated and vows to seal up all the secret compartments the very next day. The next morning, Hiraku visits the brewery to check on the dwarf. Donovan, Cross, and Wilcox are working hard to produce alcohol. Hiraku respects their dedication because they absolutely refuse to drink on the job to prevent any accidental fires. Donovan tests a new batch of booze and immediately rejects it, drawing a large black cross on the bottle and complaining that it burns the throat and lacks flavor. Instead of throwing it away, he tells his crew to redistill the bad batch and mix it with fruit juice to salvage it. Donovan then turns to Hiraku and requests that he triple the village's grape harvest so they can make more wine. Hiraku agrees and promises to expand the vineyard. Suddenly, Senna runs up to Hiraku in a total panic. She reports that a strange man managed to bypass all the angel guards and Zabaton's webs without triggering any alarms. Hiraku rushes over and finds a man in a red coat prostrating on the dirt in front of a wooden shrine. The man happily jumps up and greets Lou and Flora by name. Lou is shocked and explains to Hiraku that this man is Vargrave, the progenitor of the vampires. He is essentially their 4,000-year-old grandfather. Vargrave sits down with them in the lodge and expresses his joy over Lou's pregnancy, noting that vampires almost never reproduce naturally but instead rely on blood packs. When Hiraku asks how he still looks so young, Vargrave explains that he uses magic to erase his memories every 200 years. He only keeps his name and his clan's history so he does not go insane from living so long. Vargrave apologizes for sneaking into the village, explaining that he was drawn in by an overwhelming presence. He points to the wooden statue of God that Hiraku carved and placed in the shrine. Vargrave reveals that he met God once when he was born, and God told him to do his best despite his abnormal vampire body. Vargrave loves the statue so much that he wants to take it with him, but Hiraku refuses because it belongs to the village. Instead, Hiraku offers to carve a brand new one just for him. Vargrave is absolutely thrilled. Hiraku grabs some wood and quickly carves a massive detailed statue of God holding a staff. Vargrave straps the giant statue to his back and prepares to leave. He asks how much he owes for the artwork, but Hiraku refuses to take any money, stating that God is not something you can buy or sell. Vargrave accepts the gift, promises to find another way to repay the village's kindness, and wishes Lou a safe delivery before departing. Vargrave travels back to the human realm and arrives at a massive cathedral. The elderly head priest welcomes him back, noting that Vargrave has not visited the temple in 50 years. Vargrave reveals that he brought a new statue and orders the priest to place it in the best spot in the temple. The priest is hesitant because that spot is currently occupied by a famous statue carved by the master sculptor Turuk. However, Vargrave ignores his concerns and demands the replacement anyway, stating that the creator does not care about fame. He also orders the priests to contact all the other allied temples and instruct them to secretly support and respect Hiraku and the Great Tree Village without disturbing their peaceful lives. Back at the village, Hiraku sneezes, completely unaware of Vargrave's massive religious influence. A few days later, a delivery arrives from the progenitor. Vargrave sends a magnificent, highly ornate black and gold grand piano as a gift to celebrate Lou's pregnancy. Hiraku and the lizardmen move the massive instrument into the dining hall. The Beastkin girls are incredibly excited to play it, believing they will be able to brag about the experience for the rest of their lives. However, when they learn that it is a priceless artifact typically used only for massive temple ceremonies, they start crying in fear. Their hands start sweating, and they refuse to touch it, terrified that they will break the instrument and ruin their lives to pay off the debt. Instead, they beg Hiraku to get them a cheap beat-up piano to practice on. Hiraku contacts the merchant Michael, who quickly procures a standard practice piano for the village. Soon, Florim and the girls from the demonic kingdom spend all their free time practicing and playing music, teaching the others how to use the instrument. The village is filled with piano melodies every day. However, that night, Hiraku lies awake in his bed, clutching his blankets with a stressed expression. He stares at the ceiling in complete annoyance, wishing the girls would stop aggressively practicing the piano in the middle of the night so he could finally get some sleep. When spring finally arrives, the sun starts shining much stronger, making all the vegetables in the fields look incredibly vibrant and healthy. Hiraku spends his morning carefully pruning the tomato plants so they do not grow too tall and unmanageable. He feels a lot more knowledgeable about farming now than when he first started living in the forest. As he works, Lou walks over and tells him it is time to take a break. Everyone gathers around to eat lunch on picnic blankets under the trees. Lou uses her ice magic to drop a few cold cubes into Hiraku's drink, making him feel instantly revitalized. She gently scolds him for working too hard and warns him that he might collapse, but he insists he just cannot help himself when he looks at the crops. Hiraku then asks if she should really be walking around so much while heavily pregnant. Lou assures him she is completely fine and mentions that the other village girls told her it is actually very good to get some exercise to keep her body strong. Sena gets extremely flustered by this conversation because the ogre maids and elves have been loudly preaching about reproduction and prosperity to everyone. Lou finds it reassuring that several of the ogre maids have actually given birth themselves, as she has absolutely no experience with the process. Hiraku looks at her belly and wonders what it feels like to carry a child. Lou tells him it feels about as heavy as 2 large heads of cabbage. The other girls gather around, expressing their jealousy and guessing whether the baby will be a boy or a girl. They all offer to help Lou with whatever she needs to stay comfortable. Lou appreciates their kindness and notes that her appetite has fully returned, but she admits the only thing truly bothering her is that she cannot drink any alcohol. Sometime later, Tia and the Angel Knights approach Hiraku with a desperate request. They kneel before him and beg him to sell off all the alcohol in the village. Hiraku is completely confused by the sudden demand. Tia explains that they all swore to give up drinking in solidarity with Lou until she gives birth, but the temptation is becoming entirely unbearable. The angels confess that whenever they eat delicious food, they constantly crave alcohol to go with it, and the suffering is driving them crazy. They believe the only way to survive is to completely eliminate the source of their misery from the village. Hiraku tells them to calm down and explains that selling the alcohol would be a huge mistake. He points out that alcohol tastes much better the longer it is left to age in the barrels. He encourages them to tough out their cravings now so they can enjoy far superior drinks later on. The angels quickly realize he is right and agree to endure the wait. Meanwhile, Donovan and the other dwarf brewers approach Hiraku looking incredibly depressed. Donovan asks if they did something wrong to upset the villagers because absolutely no one is drinking a single drop of their alcohol anymore. Hiraku immediately apologizes for not informing them sooner and explains that the villagers are just holding off on drinking in solidarity with Lou. The dwarves are massively relieved to hear that their booze is not the problem. Hiraku suggests they slow down production, but Donovan absolutely refuses. He insists they need to do the exact opposite and produce as much as possible, because everyone will definitely drink twice as much to make up for lost time once the ban is lifted. Hiraku agrees and tells them to do their best. As the days pass and the sun grows even stronger, Lou stops going outside entirely to stay safe and comfortable. She spends her time resting inside the log cabin. The villagers constantly visit her to drop off gifts to help her through the final stages of her pregnancy. Tia and the angels bring her a mystical white flower from a distant snowy mountain that constantly releases a cooling magical aura to keep the room's temperature down. Ya brings a glass jar filled with secret mountain elf herbs that are said to bring immense health and vigor. Hiraku thinks the herbs sound incredibly valuable, but Ya insists they are meant to be used when the time is right, rather than sitting uselessly in storage forever. Eris visits and gives Lou a necklace with a glowing blue gem from her father's treasure room to help with magic recovery. Anne works tirelessly to make a giant batch of sweet custard pudding topped with caramel sauce just for Lou. The High Elves bring a good luck floral wreath to decorate her room, and Flora cooks up a special bowl of tomato and tofu miso soup that everyone finds surprisingly delicious. Daga also visits, but he feels completely useless since lizardmen hatch from eggs, and he knows nothing about mammalian birth. In a desperate attempt to help, Daga offers Lou his own blood to drink so she can grow stronger. Lu kindly declines, pointing out that her fangs would never be able to pierce his thick green scales. Later that evening, Hiraku and Lu sit together in the warm cabin, looking over all the wonderful gifts. Lu feels incredibly happy to be surrounded by such a caring family. Hiraku picks up a wooden mallet wrapped in a white ribbon from the table. He remembers that Donovan gave it to them, claiming it would come in handy later. Hiraku wonders if a wooden mallet is somehow used during the childbirth process. Suddenly, Lu clutches her stomach and tells him she thinks the baby is coming. Hiraku instantly panics. The maids immediately spring into action, boiling massive pots of water and rushing stacks of fresh towels into the room. Hiraku is forced to wait outside the room while Lu goes through intense labor pains. He paces back and forth, feeling entirely helpless because there is absolutely nothing he can do to ease her suffering. Seeking a moment of peace, he steps outside the lodge and looks out over the dark forest. He stares at the 2 glowing moons in the starry sky and remembers his very first night in this world. Back then, he wanted nothing more than to live completely alone, far away from anyone else. Now he realizes he has built a massive family that he deeply cares about. The night passes in a complete blur of anxiety for Hiraku. When morning finally arrives, Sina and the elves happily announce that the delivery was a complete success and both the mother and baby are doing great. Hiraku rushes into the room and finds Lu sitting up in bed, cradling a newborn baby boy wrapped in a white blanket. She smiles warmly and tells Hiraku to hold him. Hiraku is incredibly nervous and asks the maids for advice. They remind him to properly support the baby's neck. He gently takes the baby into his arms and is surprised by how warm and heavy he feels despite being so small. The baby wiggles slightly, and Lu laughs, noting that he moved around just as much while he was still in her belly. The baby then flashes a tiny smile, and Hiraku realizes he has truly become a father. He thinks back to his previous life, where he suffered through a miserable terminal illness alone in a hospital bed. He promises himself that he will raise his son to be incredibly strong so he never has to experience that kind of pain. Lu agrees, adding that they will raise him to be strong together. A week after the birth, Hiraku finishes his farming chores and takes a moment to admire the village. They decide to name the baby boy Alfred. Since he is technically a half-vampire, they are not entirely sure what to expect, but for now, he just looks like a completely normal human baby. Hiraku stands in front of the giant ancient tree where he first started his farm. He reflects on how much the settlement has expanded from a tiny clearing into a massive community. Sometime later, Hiraku calls a meeting with all the village leaders in the lodge. He tells them he wants to set up a brand new system for the village and pulls out a small silver coin embossed with a tree emblem. He explains that these are reward medals meant to thank everyone for their hard work in building up the village. The girls are confused about how to use them, so Hiraku explains they function as currency to trade for goods. Up until now, Hiraku has personally distributed all the crops, hunted meat, and traded goods to everyone whenever they asked for something. However, with the village's massive population growth, handling every single transaction himself has become absolutely impossible. The girls suggest they just trade goods directly with each other, but Hiraku points out that bartering is too subjective. He asks them how many strawberries a single apple is worth, and everyone gives a completely different answer based on their personal preferences. He also mentions that the dragons count their wealth in entire barrels of gold, which makes direct trading even more chaotic. He uses this to prove that a standard currency is necessary to keep trade fair. He admits that suddenly switching the entire village to a strict currency system would cause too much turmoil, so he plans to introduce the medals slowly as convenient vouchers. To get the economy started, he gives 3 medals to every single villager, and 30 medals to both Kuro and Zabaton to share with their massive family. Since he has to handcraft every single coin to prevent counterfeiting, his production speed is heavily limited. The villagers react to the new currency in wildly different ways. Some immediately trade their coins for wine, others buy furniture, and some purchase rare weapons from the dragon. A few people just display the coins in their rooms as decorations, which slightly annoys Hiraku, since he wants them to actually spend the money. The introduction of the medals quickly backfires on his workload, as the villagers start flooding him with custom orders for detailed wooden furniture and toys. Hiraku finds himself chopping wood and carving items constantly just to keep up with the demand. Senna even runs up to him with a handful of medals and tearfully begs to buy a baby from him. Hiraku awkwardly explains that babies are absolutely not for sale under any circumstances. Instead, the villagers figure out a clever workaround and start using their medals to rent Hiraku for a single day to help them with whatever they want. Sometime later, the village finally holds a massive outdoor feast to officially celebrate Alfred's birth. Sometime into the party, Lou admits she feels a bit bad for making everyone wait so long for the celebration. Hiraku reassures her that they could not exactly throw a massive party right after she went through labor. He notes that everyone is having a fantastic time anyway. Suddenly, Flora runs over, holding the wooden mallet Donovan gave them earlier. Donovan wheels out a massive wooden barrel marked with special symbols. He announces that this is a brand new, incredibly high-quality wine that his team specifically brewed just for Hiraku and Lou to celebrate the birth. He tells them it is a tradition to crack the barrel open together. Hiraku finally understands why Donovan gave them the mallet in the first place. He and Lou grab the tool together and smash the lid of the barrel, sending a geyser of deep red wine splashing into the air. The crowd cheers wildly, and everyone rushes to get a drink. Hiraku gives a short speech thanking everyone for their hard work and telling them to drink up. As the party continues into the night, Donovan asks Lou what she thinks of the new wine. Lou awkwardly admits she still cannot drink any alcohol because she is breastfeeding Alfred. She plans to just enjoy the party by watching everyone else have fun. Donovan quickly comes up with a brilliant idea. Instead of letting the villagers drink the entire barrel tonight, he suggests bottling a portion of the special wine to age it in the cellar. He promises to keep it perfectly preserved until Alfred is finally old enough to drink it with them. Hiraku and Lou absolutely love the idea and tell Donovan to secure the wine before the drunken villagers consume it all. Flora continues to play with the sleeping baby, loudly declaring that Alfred loves her so much that he should just become her own baby. Lou immediately shuts her down and tells her to stop talking crazy. Meanwhile, far away in the Demon Kingdom, the leaders hold an urgent meeting in their grand castle. Beazle informs the council that the village successfully welcomed a healthy baby boy. He reiterates that they stand absolutely no chance of ever challenging the village in combat. Randon suggests they secure a permanent alliance by marrying someone from the demonic kingdom into the village in the future. He specifically nominates the Demon Lord's daughter, Princess Yuri. The Demon Lord completely panics, leaps out of his chair, and furiously refuses to hand his precious daughter over to anyone, no matter the political benefits. At the same time, the merchant Michael prepares a massive shipment of expensive congratulatory gifts for the village, determined to maintain his lucrative trading relationship with them. The very next day back at the village, Tia notices Hiraku looks exhausted. Grandmaria arrives with an urgent report. She explains that Drime and the Demon Kingdom recently contacted them about a massive group of refugees who were driven out of their homes by a war with the Full Heart Kingdom. They are desperately looking for a new place to live, and the group consists of over 100 people. Hiraku realizes that taking in that many people would require building an entirely new settlement since their current space is simply not big enough. Tia suggests they just build a second village. The other girls enthusiastically agree, pointing out that the Great Tree Village saved their lives when they were desperate, so they have a moral obligation to help others in need. They jokingly suggest calling it the Great Tree Village too. Hiraku points out that building a brand new settlement will require a massive amount of preparation and supplies, but he sees how motivated everyone is. He agrees to the plan and tells them to gather everyone for a meeting right away, so they can start organizing the construction of the second village. The village is bustling with preparations for the massive influx of over 100 immigrants. Realizing that the current settlement simply cannot accommodate that many people, Hiraku and the others agree to build an entirely new village specifically for the refugees. The maids, led by Anne, prioritize making preserved foods to handle the future demand, which results in the daily meals becoming heavily vegetable-based, featuring items like massive pita sandwiches stuffed with fresh tomatoes, cucumbers, eggs, eggplant, and lettuce. Hiraku takes some of these vegetable sandwiches to the village office, where the civil servant girls are completely buried under towering mountains of paperwork. Klakasi groans that she cannot keep going. Rawaju begs for it to stop, and Rosalind complains that she is going to throw up from the sheer exhaustion of trying to keep track of the rapidly expanding food supplies and village inventory. Seeing their desperate situation, Frau steps in and brings a large group of female students in school uniforms from the Demon Kingdom to act as administrative reinforcement. The new girls mention that taking this administrative job will give them an edge in high society, but one of them is utterly shocked to see Klakasi alive, having heard a rumor that she was attacked by a Lamia and went missing while with the Pugyars. Frau laughs off the confusion and promises that the new girls will be treated to all-you-can-eat apples and a petting zoo once they finish sorting the records. However, the new civil servant girls are immediately terrified when they discover that the petting zoo consists of massive, intimidating creatures like Zabaton and Kuro, leaving them trembling on the ground. With the paperwork temporarily handled, Hiraku focuses on locating a suitable site for the new village. Gran Maria scouts the area from the sky, declaring herself the Angel of Massacre and confirming she sees no immediate danger. Hiraku and the High Elves search the ground and discuss the hierarchical relationship with the Big Tree Village. Hiraku suggests building the settlement downstream and across the river to ensure it can be easily defended in case the new residents ever decide to start a rebellion. He notes that it is always best to prepare for the worst, even if he hopes they will all get along. They eventually find a perfect clearing near a massive, prominent tree with intertwined trunks and begin clearing the forest to make a wide path. During the logging process, the elves and Daga encounter a tree that is far harder than iron. One of the elves throws a spinning green magic projectile at the trunk, but it completely bounces off without leaving a scratch. Hiraku simply steps up and manifests his omnipotent farming tool as an axe from a glowing beam of yellow magic light. He effortlessly releases a wave of energy that slices the massive trunk in half, leaving everyone staring in sheer disbelief. He then clears the rest of the land with ease and builds a sturdy wooden bridge across the river, deliberately deciding not to make it too wide so that massive monsters cannot easily cross into their territory. Over the next few days, Hiraku works tirelessly to set up the foundation for the new settlement, digging a canal from upstream, using wooden chutes to create a reservoir, and establishing a massive material processing site with canvas roofs to handle all the gathered lumber. Lu eventually visits the worksite carrying the swaddled baby Alfred and gently scolds Hiraku for overworking himself again, noting that he simply loves working too much. Hiraku finally agrees to take a break and spend some time resting with his family while admiring a highly detailed wooden statue of Zabaton he just carved. Meanwhile, the elves, lizardmen, and maids take over the heavy construction of the houses, following the detailed blueprints that specify the exact placement of foundations, long planks and short planks. They use their green magic to easily lift the wooden frames and snap the roof beams into place without breaking a sweat. Hiraku watches them work and remembers how much he struggled to build his very first tiny hut completely alone without any nails or magical assistance. The construction proceeds smoothly, and they even erect signs strictly prohibiting anyone from throwing heavy lumber across the site to ensure safety after an elf carelessly tosses a board to someone on a roof. Just as the new village starts taking shape, Gran Maria suddenly drops from the sky with an urgent report that Drime is bringing the immigrants to the village right now. Drime instantly teleports into the clearing in a burst of blue magic, looking completely exhausted, and apologizes for the sudden arrival, explaining that he flew faster than his own messenger wyvern because the situation was far more urgent than he originally anticipated. He presents the first group of refugees, revealing them to be a tribe of 72 towering minotaurs led by a massive man named Gordon. Hiraku initially pictures people with actual cow heads, but he quickly sees they just have normal faces with horns. Gordon explains that they were violently driven out of their home village and have been completely starving while stranded on the road with their children. The maids quickly serve them large bowls of warm porridge to ease their hunger, while Nerf, who previously lived near minotaurs in the snowy mountains, offers to help communicate with them, noting that they really enjoy the summer breeze. With their bellies full, Hiraku leads the minotaurs to the newly built log cabins, but he quickly realizes a massive architectural problem. The houses were built for normal-sized people, meaning the 2-meter-tall minotaurs cannot even fit through the doors, let alone comfortably live inside the cramped rooms. Forced to improvise, Hiraku temporarily houses the entire minotaur tribe inside the main village's large guest lodge, which quickly becomes incredibly crowded with parents and children trying to find sleeping spots on the floor mats. Before Hiraku can figure out a permanent housing solution, Frau receives an emergency magical message from her father, Bezel. He informs her that the political situation has suddenly changed and he just used his teleportation magic to evacuate another massive group of refugees, sending them straight to the village. Hiraku hopes Beazle will not be too reckless with his magic given his age, but the new arrivals quickly demand his attention. They turn out to be a pack of over 100 half-human, half-horse centaurs. Their leader, a female centaur named Grewald wearing a thick gold collar, haughtily introduces herself as a relative of the senior steward of the Viscount Beeg family and violently stomps her hoof, demanding that Hiraku treat her with the utmost respect. Hiraku is completely confused by the aristocratic titles and simply introduces himself as the village chief while continuing to casually clean a wooden statue. Disgusted by his lack of etiquette, Grewald insults him as a mere villager and demands that someone of proper status address her. Seeing the commotion, one of the new civil servant girls, Lashashi Droy, steps forward. She politely introduces herself as the second daughter of Count Droy from the Demon Kingdom, a noble rank far higher than a mere viscount. Realizing she just heavily insulted a high-ranking noble and a village chief who has direct ties to powerful figures, Grewald instantly drops to the ground and desperately begs for mercy, pressing her face into the dirt. Lashashi calmly accepts her apology and agrees to take charge of the centaur group to ensure they behave properly moving forward. Hiraku then tries to settle the centaurs into the new village, but he runs into the exact same issue as with the minotaurs. The standard-sized houses are way too small to accommodate their large horse bodies. Grewald begs Lu to use her magic to shrink the centaurs down to a normal human size, but Lu explains that her transformation magic only works on herself. With the main lodge already completely packed with the massive minotaurs, Hiraku has no choice but to let the centaurs temporarily sleep in the empty cowsheds and inside the southern dungeon alongside the lamias. Thinking the chaos is finally over, Hiraku is completely surprised when the lamias arrive escorting a third group of refugees they found aimlessly wandering through the dangerous forest. This group consists of several identical green-haired women representing a rare race of tree spirits called the Nunu Daphne. Their representative, Igu, carries a small, talking tree stump that serves as a portable stool and explains that their hometown was completely flooded after reckless humans cut down too many trees. They heard about the Great Tree Village from Michael the Merchant, who showed them the magnificent fruits grown there. They bravely traveled all the way across the deadly forest by using their unique ability to disguise themselves as ordinary trees whenever vicious monsters approached, though Igu notes that if they get hurt in tree form, they cannot easily change back. Hiraku immediately offers to host a grand banquet and give them fresh fruit, but Igu politely declines, explaining that tree spirits only need clean water, bright sunlight, and highly nutritious fragrant soil to survive. They immediately walk over to the village's freshly tilled farming fields, bury their bare feet in the dark dirt, and begin happily absorbing the nutrients as small white and pink flowers magically bloom on their bodies and the tree stump. Hiraku tries to offer them some of the newly built houses, suggesting that they can make the windows larger to let in more sunlight. However, the tree spirits flatly refuse to go inside, preferring to stay entirely outdoors where they can fully soak up the sun and rain. As night falls and the blue and pink moons rise, the village is completely packed with refugees in the most unconventional ways possible. The towering minotaurs are crammed into the main lodge, the centaurs are resting in the stables on beds of hay, and the Nunu Daphnis are literally planted in the middle of the farming fields under the moonlight. Meanwhile, the brand new village they just spent days painstakingly building sits completely empty and deserted, because the houses are entirely the wrong size for any of the new demi-human residents. Realizing their massive logistical mistake, Hiraku and the village leaders gather in the lodge to rethink their entire construction plan. One of the elves lies face down on the floor in sheer exhaustion, but quickly jumps back up. Instead of being discouraged, the elves and maids enthusiastically decide to completely scrap the standard house designs and start over. They commit to building massive custom homes large enough to comfortably fit all 72 minotaurs and the 100 centaurs. Despite the monumental amount of work ahead, everyone is fully motivated to get the job done and provide their new residents with a proper place to live. To address the housing shortage for the massive influx of immigrants, Hiraku calls a meeting inside a partitioned log cabin to apologize for not having suitable homes ready. He assigns representatives for each group, placing Narf in charge of the towering minotaurs, Lashashi to manage the centaurs, and Mam to attend to the tree spirit. During the meeting, the centaur representative Gruwald drops to her knees and acts overly deferential, comparing herself to a mere flake of house dust resting in the corner of the room. Finding this extreme subservience incredibly awkward, Hiraku asks her to act more self-important to ease the tension. Prompted by a cheerful blonde girl holding up a wooden cue card, Gruwald instantly complies, adopting a comically arrogant tone and demanding that Hiraku be grateful for her presence. Hiraku then explains that the original Great Tree Village was built specifically for human-sized beings, which makes it impossible for the large demi-humans to live comfortably in the existing structures. To solve this logistical nightmare, they decide to build entirely separate settlements tailored to the specific physical needs of the Minotaurs and Centaurs. They consult a parchment map and select locations downstream, planning out the routes to begin clearing the dense forest. Hiraku enlists the help of the dragons Lasti and Harem to clear the thick trees. Lasti enthusiastically unleashes a massive pillar of pink magical energy that violently obliterates a huge chunk of the forest, leaving a scarred path of destruction. Immediately after, Harem delivers a devastating kick to a tree trunk, unleashing a burst of brilliant white energy that shatters the wood into a massive cloud of splinters. Seeing the sheer devastation caused by their casual attacks, Hiraku frantically waves his arms and asks them to hold back their power so they do not accidentally destroy the entire forest of death. With the dragons reined in, the high elves, lizardmen, and horned kinpichin to handle the manual labor, digging paths, shifting fallen trees, and stacking heavy logs to build sturdy wooden walls. Harem chews on an apple and complains that the manual labor is a tedious slog, asking if she can just burn the trees down to save time, but Hiraku strictly forbids the use of fire. Meanwhile, back at the main village, the giant spider Zabaton knits a fresh batch of baby clothes for Hiraku's newborn son Alfred, presenting a small blue and white ruffled shirt that the elves note is still a bit too large for the infant. Later, Lou struggles to calm a crying Alfred. Anne steps in and successfully soothes the baby by making funny faces, causing comical white facial icons to manifest in the air. Lou is completely amazed by this trick and begs to know how she did it, but Anne simply smiles and claims it is a secret. Back at the construction site, the second village is specifically designed for the towering Minotaurs. They construct taller, one-story homes equipped with oversized furniture to fit their massive frames. Gordon sits in one of the oversized chairs and notes that the scale makes him feel like a child again. They even design special beds composed of wooden platforms with built-in slots, so the Minotaurs can sleep comfortably without their horns hitting the headboards. The third village is built for the Centaurs and features stable-like structures with exposed rafters and exceptionally wide entrances to accommodate their horse bodies. Instead of standard solid doors, they install heavy beige curtains drawn by ropes, which are much easier for the Centaurs to operate, though they also include sliding doors to keep out the heavy rain. After a month of grueling hard work, both new villages are successfully completed just before the harsh winter weather arrives. Hiraku gathers the village leaders, including Lou and Tia, in the main lodge to discuss naming the new settlements. Checking a detailed map, he jokingly suggests names based on location like Upton, Middleton, and Downton, but the others reject the ideas. They ultimately decide to simply name them Village 1, Village 2, and Village 3, because changing all the administrative paperwork to reflect complex new names would be a complete nightmare for the exhausted civil servant girls. Gordon is officially appointed as the mayor of Village 2, and Gruwald becomes the mayor of Village 3. The girls suggest giving Hiraku a grander title like High Mayor, Great Mayor, or King Mayor to establish a clearer hierarchy. Hiraku briefly imagines himself standing triumphantly with a baton under a celestial sun halo, quickly shakes his head and firmly rejects the idea of making himself sound like an arrogant monarch. During the meeting, a beastkin girl asks when the tree spirits will get their own village. Hiraku explains that they decided against building a dedicated settlement for the new Daphne. Hearing this, the tree spirits become incredibly depressed, physically wilting and dressing up like sad pine cones to express their misery. Hiraku quickly clarifies his overarching plan to cheer them up. He explains that the tree spirits possess a unique telepathic ability to communicate with each other over long distances. Because of this, he wants to station them at key locations across the territory to serve as an instant communication network between the separate villages. He also tasks them with watching over the currently uninhabited Village 1 to ensure it does not fall into ruin. Furthermore, their natural magical glow makes them perfect to act as streetlights during the dark evenings. Realizing their vital importance to the growing community, the tree spirits happily accept their new roles and plant themselves in the field. Next, Hiraku attempts to assign daily jobs to the residents of the new villages. He quickly realizes that the minotaurs and centaurs are completely unsuited for hunting the fast and vicious monsters that roam the forest, such as the deadly gray-furred rabbits with glowing red eyes. The minotaurs try to hunt with shovels and hoes but are far too peaceful and slow for tracking agile prey, while the centaur refugees lack proper combat experience and are forced into defensive formations. Hiraku realizes he only thought hunting in the forest was easy because Kuro's inferno wolves possess unimaginable strength and handled all the dangerous predators effortlessly. To prevent any unnecessary casualties, Hiraku strictly forbids the new villagers from entering the woods to hunt. Instead, he assigns Kuro and Zabaton's offspring to patrol and defend the new settlements. He also considers using the tree spirits as hunters, but notes they rely entirely on ambush tactics and cannot handle large groups of enemies. To make the new villages self-sufficient without hunting, Hiraku decides they need to focus entirely on agriculture and begins tilling fields for them. However, the seeds they plant refuse to take root in the dark soil. Hiraku realizes that the massive and rapid harvests in the Great Tree Village are entirely due to the divine power of his almighty farming tool, which magically fertilizes the earth and accelerates crop growth regardless of the season. Since he is the only person capable of wielding the tool, the new villages must rely on traditional non-magical farming methods. Gordon uses his past agricultural experience to step up as their farming mentor. He instructs the villagers to lay down thick layers of straw over the soil to keep it warm during the freezing winter months. They decide to plant winter wheat, knowing it will take half a year to grow before it is ready for harvest. Feeling deeply grateful for the immense convenience of his magical tool, Hiraku carves detailed wooden statues of the god of creation and the god of agriculture to enshrine in the village. The villagers admire the craftsmanship but find his interpretation of the god of agriculture as an old man rather interesting, noting that different lands have different interpretations of the deity. While the minotaurs take charge of the traditional farming, the centaurs utilize their natural speed and endurance to establish a dedicated delivery service between the villages. They hitch themselves to wooden wagons and transport heavy crates, barrels and sacks across the forest path. They easily outrun any monsters and constantly try to set new speed records on their routes, motivated by a glowing crystal atop a stone altar. However, their reckless racing leads to accidents, and they end up crashing their cart in a cloud of dust, sending their cargo and a purple slime flying into the air. Hiraku observes the exhausted centaurs lying near the wreckage and hopes they start prioritizing safety over speed. Sometime later, Gruwald notices that Hiraku keeps regular horses on his farm. Hiraku admits he has always wanted to ride one, but when he tries to offer a black horse a carrot, the animal completely ignores his commands and refuses to let him mount. Gruwald offers to let him ride on her back instead, but Hiraku insists it is too dangerous to ride a wild beast and wants to ride the actual horse. Gruwald uses her abilities to communicate with a brown horse, convincing it to let them ride. Hiraku mounts the horse behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders, and they speed off through the dense pine forest. Hiraku enjoys his first horseback ride, though he notes it is quite bumpy when the horse suddenly accelerates. On another day, the black horse that previously ignored Hiraku suddenly becomes friendly, releasing blue electric magic from its snout, and allows him to ride it across the green fields. Gruwald spots them from behind a cabin and becomes intensely jealous that the horse is stealing Hiraku's attention. The very next morning, she intercepts him on the path and demands that he ride her instead of the horse. The horse reacts with a comical grimace, and Hiraku frantically pacifies Gruwald by promising to alternate his riding schedule, agreeing to ride the horse one day and her the next. Sometime later, Hiraku relaxes under a large tree with Lou and baby Alfred. The baby starts crying, and Hiraku notes he can smell the answer, prompting them to change his diaper. He expresses deep concern about the village's heavy reliance on his magical farming tool, worrying about what will happen to the food supply if he ever catches a cold or becomes too sick to work the field. Lou tells him to stop overthinking and reminds him that he will not be retiring anytime soon, so he should just relax and enjoy the present. Hiraku then brings up another major concern regarding the village's demographic. Looking at a mental pie chart, he notes that the Great Tree Village is overwhelmingly populated by women, with female elves, maids, and beastkin vastly outnumbering the few men. He worries about the future generations and hopes the new immigrants will help balance the population. He asks Narf about their customs, but learns that minotaurs strictly marry within their own race due to their massive physical size. Hoping the centaurs can provide a solution, Hiraku meets with Gruwald to discuss their marriage custom. She explains that all their adult men are currently off fighting a war, leaving only young boys behind in the village. When Hiraku asks if centaurs ever marry outside their race, Gruwald completely misunderstands his intentions. Assuming Hiraku is demanding her as a bride in exchange for providing her people with a home, she drops her formal attitude and excitedly offers herself to him. She claims that men love overpowering strong women and aggressively insists that he take her. Hiraku frantically waves his hands and desperately tries to calm her down, clarifying that he is not asking for anything of the sort. He explains that he was simply trying to figure out how they plan to sustain their population in the long term, leaving her slightly disappointed but understanding of his practical concern. That's all for this episode. Subscribe for more recaps and see you in the next one.